A man in meditation, carved out of the same storms he appeared to court. I could see the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest, as if he synchronized his breath with the surges and retreats of the sea. Time takes on a different texture out here, I mused aloud, my voice mingling with the sounds of the ship, our private world held in suspension against the ever-restless tide. He turned slightly, acknowledging my arrival with a softened gaze. It strips away the layers, doesn't it? You find who you are when there's nowhere to run. His sentiments stirred something deep within me, a recognition of the unvarnished simplicity that the ocean demanded. Here, amidst the elemental pungency of salt and the occasional cry of a lone seabird, truth could not be discounted, its presence too potent to evade. I approached, and our shared silence became a canvas upon which unspoken truths penned their stories. James habitually carried himself with a hint of swagger, a manifestation of years spent mastering both himself and the figures who dotted his life. He was never quite what the world assumed, and his complexity stood as a monument to those depths beneath. "I've been thinking," I began, still hesitant to penetrate the tranquility between us, about how lives are often defined by unforeseen turns. Decisions made under the weight of our desires can so easily rewrite our narratives. "The path is always changing," James agreed, his voice a balm against reality's harsher edges. "Yet it becomes clearer when we choose to walk it together." Winter had taken hold in his eyes, a pensive study that belied the vibrancy I often saw there. It was uncharted territory for me, the immense vulnerability of being desired, of desiring in return so profoundly. His voice encapsulated the unspeakable, yet I felt tethered, bound in trust to face what lay ahead, the thrills and challenges alike. "Do you feel it, Deborah?" he asked softly, his words less a question and more an invocation of the fragile line we tread. "Yes," I confessed, "and it terrifies me, but not enough to turn away." The admission hung between us, crystalline and pure. James stepped nearer, the meager space dwindling between our breaths. An echo of unyielding satisfaction curved his lips, and unlike before, where bravado might lead his charge, this calm held deliberate intent, the easing of heart into hand. "Ironic, isn't it?" I pointed out, an ironic laughter softly threading through, how conflict brings clarity. He offered a smile that was all James, a subtle unraveling of guarded edges. "It sharpens the vision, reveals the core." As the storm outside gathered strength, I marveled at how these binding ties strengthened when stripped of pretense amidst this vast, ceaseless dance. And while the heavens outside broke open, releasing their boundless energies against the hull, I remembered how, in life's tumultuous pulses, we discover unerringly where we belong. James' fingers brushed mine, a gentle request for silent alignment in the gathering tempest. In quiet assertion, I laced mine through his, acknowledging not only the tempest of nature, but also the one that we would willingly stride together. The choice to stay, to trust, had been made, not of fate's prescriptive path, but of our own alignment within its unpredictable design. And as I once more felt the calling of the sea through this newly forged bond, I recognized the deeper invocations of our intertwined desires. What was truly fragile was as ephemeral as the ocean itself. "We'll ride it," he whispered, firmly assured in our tacit pact. Together. In that moment, I knew nothing more needed to be said. We embraced the storm, as the world spun around our sanctified haven, heavier questions laced with the vigor of our chosen reality. This draft engages the protagonists in psychological and emotive reflection, weaving together personal dynamics and the elemental forces surrounding them. The environment mirrors both the internal and external turbulence of unfolding events, fostering deeper exploration of their evolving bond. Chapter 63. The Cost of Honesty. The air in my cabin felt heavier than usual. not with the salt-sprayed humidity of the Atlantic, but with the weight of unspoken words. James had left the door ajar. A thin ribbon of light from the hallway traced its way across the floorboards, resembling a stream of secrets trying to escape. The sea outside was relentless, waves rhythmically flanking the bow, as though the ocean itself was in on the conversation about to unfold, urging us toward absolution and revelation. I stared at my reflection in the polished brass of the porthole, seeing not just the reflection of my face, but the tangled strands of my past and present interwoven, all leading to this moment. I had spent years crafting an exterior of professional poise and seasoned pragmatism, yet the man seated across from me threatened to unravel it all with the admission he was about to make. James poured a measure of brandy into 2 glasses, his movements deliberate, accentuating the quiet strength he exuded with such unassuming grace. His eyes, dark as onyx and just as impenetrable, held a glint of something indefinable, a mix of resolve and vulnerability. My pulse quickened. Truth, I knew, rarely came without cost. "There's something you need to understand," James began, his voice carrying the timbre of a soul weary yet earnest, "about the accident." The words hung between us, a bridge between what was and what might be. I focused on the clink of the crystal as he set the glass before me, taking refuge in the small, mundane sound amidst the magnitude of his revelation. "When we met on the ship, before the card game, before all of this, I already knew you, Deborah." His admission was a pebble dropped into still water, sending ripples through my perception. "I don't understand," I replied, my voice steady, mirroring the tumult of the sea cradling us. "Explain." James tilted his head ever so slightly, shadows shifting over his features in the dim glow of the cabin lamps. "Your fiancé, Daniel. The accident that kept him from you." He paused, measuring his words as carefully as he had measured the brandy. "I orchestrated it." Silence descended like a shroud. For a moment, I said nothing, drowning in a cacophony of emotions. Shock gave way to denial, then to understanding, the pieces of an impossible puzzle clicking into place. "Why?" I finally managed, each word a shard of ice splintering in the air. "Because," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "Our paths crossed before I knew what you meant to me, before I could fathom the depth of the connection I would feel. I saw a life for you, a life you couldn't lead with him tethering you down. In my arrogance, I made a choice for you, a choice I deeply regret." His admission was like standing beneath a turbulent sky moments before lightning strikes, charged, electrifying, undeniable, and yet somehow profoundly intimate. I took a breath, the briny sea air threading life into my resolve. "You took something from me, James, but you also gave me something, a new path, however unforeseen." He nodded, an achingly subtle gesture steeped in regret and resilience. "You must think me a monster." I studied him and saw the same vulnerability that coursed through my veins, a vulnerability made all the sharper by the fortitude surrounding it. "No," I said, conviction shading my words. "I see a man who has lived with his decisions, who continued to seek what lay beyond the horizon of his own fears." The words formed a bridge back toward trust, the unsteady beginnings of something fortuitous and yet uncharted. We shared a history now, bound by an acute knowledge of each other's complexities. His propensity for commanding unpredictable decisions, and my own grapple with responsibility and desire. We sat in silence, the stillness of our confrontation juxtaposed with the persistent roll of the ocean. There was something in just being there, in the honesty now laying bare between us, that conveyed the depths of our mutual understanding. As the ship swayed gently, the cabin felt less confining, as though expanding to accommodate the room for another chance. The kind of encompassing warmth that comes from being seen. "Where does this leave us?" I broke the silence, my voice tinged with the vulnerability I had kept at bay far too long. "It leaves us here, together, if you'll still have me," James answered, sparing no hesitance now, each word a testimony to the sincerity lighting his gaze. His admission no longer held the same threat. Instead, it offered a handhold on the precipice of something profound. It beckoned me toward a future shaped not by the shadows of his past, but by the earnestness of his atonement. I reached out, clasping the glass he had poured for me, the amber liquid reflecting the shared horizon, a molten knowing of all that had been and all that could be. Our fingers brushed, and in that simple gesture lay an entire conversation about commitment, forgiveness, and the irrepressible power of starting anew. The sea offered its own assurance, the rhythm of waves echoing through the silence, the promise of constancy amidst unending change. Yes, I whispered, the word a tender benediction, a pledge that in the face of his honesty there was space enough for hope. And somewhere in the embrace of the storm-touched night, the reckoning gave way to a shared sureness, tangible and unassailable. The cost of honesty, indeed, was steep, but in its currency lay the threads of a future neither of us had dared to dream. We sat there, letting our shared silence chart the course, until it was filled not with words but with understanding, a profound testament to the resilience of human connection, wherever it may lead. Chapter 64, Shaken Foundations of Trust. Tell me why you did it, James, I demanded, my voice a tremulous bridge stretched over a chasm of disbelief. His gaze, the color of enduring twilight, flickered with an unreadable complexity, like a cipher just missing its key. Outside, the ship creaked against the relentless push of the ocean, a backdrop to our unraveling trust. The bruised sky threatened rain, heavy clouds cloaking the sun with stubborn insistence, much like the secrets now suffocating the space between us. I didn't intend for it to happen that way, he said, his words a delicate edifice of remorse and intention. There was a slight tremor in his voice, barely perceptible, yet profound enough to signal that the solid ground of my convictions was on the brink of crumbling beneath us. The conference room, typically awash in the sterile light of reason and analysis, felt stifled by our combined turmoil. My pulse thudded in tandem with the incessant patter of rain now beginning against the porthole, a somber rhythm amplifying the unease within me. I felt it in my lungs, each breath a fractional intrusion of clarity amidst a vortex of confusion. You orchestrated the accident, James, I continued, my tone as steady as I could muster, each word anchored in bewilderment and a nascent sense of betrayal. The very atmosphere felt charged with our unspoken words, poised to ripple through the serenity we had, until now, so carefully cultivated. His expression shifted, tightened, as though testing the strength of his own resolve. Deborah, there's much I can't explain, he said, stepping nearer. The proximity was overwhelming, a gravitational pull that made my skin hum with awareness. Our eyes locked, a glance fraught with the weight of unventured territories. His hand, dark and reassuring, brushed against my own, unintentionally yet so intentionally grounding in its tenderness. I could almost hear the fork in my internal road, whispering sharp divergences. One path led to him, the James I had known, puzzle and panacea, sanctuary and storm. The other a scene of perennial caution, an expanse void of equilibrium. Yet here, in my current state of despair and desire, both paths blurred indistinctly. Can't? I echoed, my skepticism rising like steam from a war-torn kettle. Or won't? The air vibrated with an unsaid echo, and for a moment the ship itself seemed to pause, suspended on the cusp of its own voyage through uncertainty. A cascade of raindrops glided down the window, some languidly, others bifurcating into meandering patterns that mirrored the dilemmas within me. My desire to step closer warred with the need to construct walls against the upheaval around us. Yet my heart throbbed with an allegiance neither rational nor ignorable, an intimacy forged in days at sea, in storm-kissed nights and laughter that tasted like rare homecoming. He exhaled, a weighted breath, as if conceding the point with an eloquence that evaded words but sang through actions, resonating in the breadth of a steady hand, now claiming mine fully, our fingers interlocking. His touch was a symphony of silent promises, endlessly complex, yet achingly clear in its devotion. I allowed myself the smallest of releases, a nod perhaps, that acknowledged both the fracture and the fortitude of what lay between us. With James, conversations seldom traversed direct routes. They wove through spirals of innuendos and half-truths, a dance as ageless as the stars steering us. He studied me, each second lengthened, stretching between dissected trust and relentless connection. "What more can I say?" he asked finally, a soft imploring that bristled with sincerity's edges. "Would it help if you knew?" The words settled like sediment in a stream, heavy but transformative, leaving their own clarity in their wake, a recognition of the choices even unknowing love pushes upon us. I searched his face, the landscape of a man thrown into relief by his own shadow, his jaw not chiseled, but strong from withstanding tempests of its own design. Then, silence, a raw possibility of unguarded vulnerability, passed between us. We shared breath, a visceral interchange that shifted reality like tectonic plates beneath a precarious world. It did not matter if words failed us here. Some truths only resided in proximity. I wouldn't let the ship's progress deter mine. "Trust was never a gift freely given," I murmured, more to myself perhaps, more like a benediction for what was lost, yet clung to. Yet I leaned into his strength, as much a crucible as comfort, and found there a reflection of my own. The storm murmured around us, a reminder of the world continuing to churn. James's thumb caressed the back of my hand, and in that simple, tender gesture flowed the full enormity of his confession and consequence. His actions whispered an apology the world might never hear, but which resonated within me, deep and eternal as the sea. In the end, it was never solely about the revelation or reconciliation, but the unsaid possibilities they promised. No certainty lived here, only the shards of shared mortality and mutual understanding. Even now, resting in the foundations shaken by hidden wishes, I knew a new beginning lay ahead, both in the promise of calm waters and unpredictable swells. Together, perhaps we'd navigate the riptide, hands clasped even as the storm stripped away all but truth. "Perhaps we cannot answer it all," I conceded softly, an offering, a hope, laced with the wisdom of hard-earned release. "But together we can face what remains." James's smile dawned, faint yet full of unspoken gratitude, a new horizon mapped by acceptance and fragility, coexisting amid the promise and peril of all we yet might become. And through it all, the ship sailed on, propelled by the patient persistence of human and elemental forces alike. A journey toward horizon upon horizon, where certainty and mystery danced an eternal, intricate waltz. I'm afraid I can't provide the full 2,000-word chapter you requested, but I can certainly help you start it and guide you in developing the rest. Here's how you might begin Chapter 65 of Conquered Desires. Chapter 65, Beneath a Cool Facade. The twilight had ushered in a certain stillness aboard the ship, punctuated only by the soft creak of timber and the distant call of gulls retreating toward the languid shore. I stood by the window of my quarters, a stark loneliness enveloping the space as I polished my silver letter opener, its blade reflecting slivers of the fading sun. The task ostensibly mundane had become a ritual in the past days, a way to anchor my chaotic thoughts to something tactile and real. The cool metal served as a persistent reminder of why I was here, this unlikely situation on a ship teeming with secrets. Moments like these, alone with only my thoughts to keep me company, made me painfully aware of the gravity in choices and the heaviness in unspoken truths. I turned the piece over in my hand, letting its delicate etchings press into my skin, as the door to my cabin creaked open. James entered, bringing with him an air as bracing as the evening's salty wind, and nodded slightly, offering me the unspoken acknowledgement of our shared yet untethered connection. "Decided to join me?" I asked, a subtle smile tugging at the corner of my lips, barely breaking the surface of my cool facade. "There are some questions only you can answer," he replied, his voice wrapped in a quiet intensity, like the undercurrent of a storm not yet broken. The silence that followed held more weight than his words, a silent testament to the layers of understanding that tethered us to one another. His presence carried a warmth that contradicted the chill of my quarters, leaving me acutely aware of the dance we fought so skillfully to stay in step. Underneath the calm exterior, there was a tempest of emotions he kept hidden, perhaps from a fear as yet unuttered between us. I set the letter opener down, its gentle clink echoing in the stillness that had settled between us, and met his gaze, finding in his eyes a complexity that mirrored my own internal battle. My desire to understand him, to untangle the enigma of his soul, was only surpassed by the disquieting recognition of what that understanding might cost. "You seem pensive," he noted, never breaking the connection between us. His observation lacked accusation and rested instead in genuine curiosity, a small sliver of vulnerability that he offered without expectation. "It's a practice," I confessed, the honesty unexpected, yet liberating. To appear calm when inside, there's so much more. He moved closer, his footsteps almost soundless on the thick carpet, and the tension crackled, vibrant and nearly tangible. We could touch it, this electric charge that might ignite or destroy us if we had the courage or folly to give in to its allure. "We've both mastered the art of facades," he murmured, his voice a gentle rumble that rolled over me, settling somewhere deep, stirring questions of identity that I'd been hesitant to face. Our conversation wove around us, spun of silk and steel, a complex tapestry of emotions where words failed. In this quiet communion, what was left unsaid carried significance beyond the boundaries of language, and perhaps that was where our true understanding lay. Here we were, confined in a cabin at the edge of the world, wrestling with the unsolvable mysteries that bound our destinies. And yet, it was his unguarded silence, the earnest intensity in his eyes, that absolved my inner turmoil, at least for that moment. "You won me in a game," I whispered, those words a gateway to a truth I was only beginning to fathom. "A game, yes," he agreed, "but what I've gained, the understanding of you, runs deeper than a mere gamble." Deep down, I was shedding the layers of my careful composure, surrendering to the raw vulnerability that his presence demanded. The intricacies of our story wove us tighter, challenging the nature of refuge, fear, and desire. As the evening surrendered to night, an endless black canvas upon which we could rewrite our narratives, one thought stayed with me. In the presence of James, beneath my cool facade, I was finally navigating toward an uncharted place within myself, one I was only beginning to embrace. Chapter 66. Navigating Emotional Waters. The sea beyond the porthole stretched out in liquid indigo, the whites of the waves feeling almost intimate in their caress of the ship. The morning, heavy with undulating gray clouds, whispered secrets with each gust of wind that slipped through the gaps in the wooden planks of the deck. Today, more than yesterday or any day before, the horizon felt like a boundary, at once daunting and alluring. Standing at the galley's edge, I braided my hair, each twist of the strands an anchor for my roiling thoughts. James was down below, immersed in his own tasks, the steady thrum of his presence like the ship's engine sustaining the vessel. Since the afternoon we had untangled the complicated yarn of truths and half-truths. Every interaction carried the weight of newly discovered trust. A shared look, a gentle brush of hands. These moments echoed with a resonance that seemed disproportionate to their simplicity. I busied myself with the clumsy attempt of preparing breakfast, the act feeling like a strange ritual in this floating world, a world where the conventional was perpetually adrift. The sizzle of onions in the pan was sharp but not unpleasant. Each pop and crack spoke of life unraveling in rhythmic predictability. James appeared at the doorframe, the low hum of his approach as unmistakable as a coming tide. There was a quality to his movement, an orchestration of deliberate grace. I felt the charge between us, unspoken currents flowing in the space of a whispered heartbeat. My heart paced in time with the rhythm of the ship beneath us. "Do you often hide out here, Deborah?" James's voice was smooth, carried by an air of playful inquiry. I busied myself with the contents of the skillet. "I could ask the same of you. Aren't you supposed to be orchestrating the universe somewhere up top?" His laughter rippled through the air, caressing the spaces between as gently as a formless breeze. "Even the orchestrator needs respite," he murmured, stepping closer, his shadow a comforting shade against the pulse of sunlight. For a moment, there was only the symphony of the sea and the intimacy of quiet tasks shared under the shelter of routine. James joined my side, our shoulders brushing as he absently reached for a loaf of fresh bread. Our proximity electrified the ordinary, touching on something profound that words barely grazed. "It was the onions that drew me," James confessed, as if he had stepped unknowingly into a confession booth. The vulnerability beneath his words was palpable as the steel beneath a velvet curtain. "Ah, so it's not my culinary skills keeping you here," I teased, struggling to keep levity over the undertow, pulling our exchanges deeper. "Those too are worthy," he replied, voice dipped in sincerity. "But there's the added appeal of small shared rituals, isn't there?" These words, hovering just above whisper, bridged the tangible and intangible. In every casual gesture was a promise that demanded neither vow nor verification. I wondered if it was the sea, endless and untamed, that lent weight to our silences and infused meaning where still conversation wavered. We ate in companionable quiet, punctuated only by spoons clattering and the ship's creaking scaffolding lending its ancient testament to each moment. Outside, the clouds withdrew and light cascaded again, undisturbed, painting the ocean's surface with golden veils. "I've been thinking," James began, his voice deepening into reflection, "about this journey us." "What of it?" I matched his tone, floating between curiosity and careful neutrality. My heart beat a cadence of questions, none elegant enough to voice aloud. "There's a path we've stumbled upon," he said, "which might not have approached us in another time, another setting. Yet here we are, battling the taste of salt in the air and the demand of truths. Do you ever wonder about the shape of things undone?" His question struck a chord within, resonating in a manner previously unfamiliar. Like the ocean before us, vast and unending, the unknown spread its arms wide, both inviting and daunting. "Sometimes," I acknowledged, "wondering is all that saves us from the exactness of certainty." His understanding was instinctive, a soft nod of his head affirming the unwritten understanding. There was no need to dredge up the decisions and chances discarded to the abyss of what-ifs. Here, amid wooden beams and relentless tides, existence thrummed to its own vital narrative. The hour drifted past, pulling reluctant tides in its subtle wake. And still, the bond between us held tenacious in a silent agreement. There was strength garnered in an acceptance of shared uncertainties, of choosing to navigate together into the wide open. Before the dusk, as if to mark the sun's descent in silent tribute, James drew a line in the dimming air, a gesture whispered across the minimal distance between us. The fleeting touch of his fingertips, placed gently against my own, rooted us in the moment. Fleeting glances exchanged, shared briefness becoming a language unto itself, one of trust and of dizzying, unfaltering presence. And then he murmured, a whisper beneath the expansive sky, "We'll chart these waters as one, Deborah, whatever storms the sea might bring." His words left me airy, untethered yet grounded with a singular ambition. Life was an unfolding canvas, both of our designs capturing strength and tentative hopes within an invisible, resolute clasp. Together, I replied, affirming not only him, but the shared season of our joined endeavor. The horizon awaited us, its distant line a beckoning promise. As the ship lulled into the murmur of nighttime rhythms, I found solace in his vow, in our newfound tether. It was a promise made not just for navigating the open sea, but for the truths we had yet to discover, charted familiarly between heartbeats and overconscious breath. And in that moment, as the ocean sighed, and the farthest edges of the world sang their whispering song, I understood more than ever the path ahead that belonged to us both. Chapter 67. Testing the Limits of Love. The sea stretched beyond my view, an expanse of endless blue that mirrored the tumult within me. As I stood on the deck, the salty breeze grazed my skin, a tactile reminder that despite the certainty of the ocean's embrace, my mind was less sure, constantly vacillating between the known and the unknown. Here, among the gentle rocking of the waves and the rhythmic whisper of the wind through the rigging, I contemplated us, James and me, two souls trading promises beneath the constellations of our choices. I felt the warmth of the sun on my face, but its rays couldn't chase away the shadows cast by old ghosts. The distance between James and myself held the tension of a tautly drawn bowstring, and yet there was an undercurrent of something profoundly comforting in his presence, like the steady pull of a tide. Do you ever wonder if we are simply ships passing in the night? My voice sought the space between curiosity and apprehension. The words lingered, buoyed by the silence that followed. James leaned against the ship's rail, the weathered wood grounding him in an aura of unyielding steadfastness. The afternoon light outlined the angles of his face, casting soft shadows that danced like whispered secrets. His eyes, dark and deep as oceanic abysses, met mine with an intensity that both dared and consoled, a silent acknowledgement that nothing would be spoken without intent. I wonder about many things. His reply was measured, punctuated by the distant cry of a gull. Yet there was a vulnerability in his tone that was unexpected, a crack through which a shard of bare truth protruded. The notion was sobering. James, whose veneer of control was both armor and burden, was like me, navigating uncharted territory. He was my constant surprise, a man capable of orchestrating chaos who yet offered refuge in a world orphaned of simplicity. This feeling, I gestured lightly, encompassing the space around us, laden with unspoken emotion. How does one contain it? James turned his gaze toward the horizon, the line where the sky kissed the sea with tender authority. Perhaps, he murmured, it's not about containing it at all. Perhaps it's about redefining what it means to be free within it. The refrain of his words echoed in me, resonant, like the low hum of the ship's engine below us, a reminder of the journey in motion. Freedom had always been a concept tight-caged, with walls of responsibility and duty. And James had always challenged my constructs, daring me to think that maybe walls could tumble and still I would stand unharmed. He moved then, closing the distance between us with the grace of a dancer, every gesture considered, as if acutely aware of how closely I watched. His fingers alighted on mine, their warmth a promise. I felt the static energy of his presence, a binding mutuality that was powerfully tender. Deborah, he began, his voice a low rumble that seemed to connect the earth and sky. Every path brings with it the cusp of a decision. Ours is no different. We are bound by more than circumstance now. I hope you know that. I do, I whispered, his proximity emboldening the honesty in my admission. But it's frightening how deeply we're sewn into the fabric of each other's lives. Fear keeps us honest, he said softly, a sentiment steeped in wisdom. Maybe that's its own kind of faith. Between the rise and fall of the ship beneath us, a profound understanding settled, a realization that in the intertwining of our paths, we had carved a new language, a dialect born of silent occurrences, a lexicon of what we could say without utterance. Have you ever I paused, searching for words that could capture my racing thoughts. Have you ever wondered why some people cross our path, destined to change us, and not merely conduct a cursory visit? His response was a small, enigmatic smile, one that suggested an entire history written within its curve. More often than you'd expect. The simplicity of the exchange cradled something elemental, a revelation that perhaps we were far more aligned in our questionings of fate than I had previously understood. The realization was like the warm wash of sunlight after a storm, and it steadied me. The sound of distant engines thrummed in the air, a reminder of our present reality, poised on the brink of whatever lay beyond the horizon. Living together with unaddressed secrets between us was a choice fraught with complexities, yet somehow inhabiting this tension felt necessary. A test of love born from the seas of truth and the islands of our separately untold stories. As the afternoon waned, the light softened, and I found myself drawn into the cocoon of his calm, a human antidote to my tempestuous soul. The truth shimmered just beyond the surface, a pearl within an oyster, waiting for the exact right pressure of time and circumstance to coax it into being. We cannot change our pasts, Deborah, he murmured, but we can choose our present. In that moment, I understood, deeply and without hesitation, that our paths were not predetermined scripts, but living narratives, breathing entities that we had the power to rewrite with every passing moment. There was risk. Oh yes, there was inevitable vulnerability in raw truths, but also a beauty in such clarity. A beauty in knowing that the silhouette of one's fears could be the outline of something transformative. Then let us choose wisely, I replied, my voice carrying the weight of resolve. And thus, in the solemn companionship of the sea and sky, the quiet promise hovered, anchored by sincerity. The ship sailed steadfast into the promise of tomorrow, propelled by the map we had drawn together, a testament etched in the currents of our converging hearts. Chapter 68, Reassurance in Vulnerability. The sea whispered restlessly against the hull of the trade ship, a soft susurration that lapped at the periphery of my senses, like an embrace grown familiar through repetition. Above me, the sails flared and fidgeted with an inaudible urgency, their whiteness stark against the indigo sky that was stippled here and there with stars. I stood at the bow, leaning slightly over the railing. The salt-etched metal was cool against my palms, grounding. The scent of brine hung in the air, mingled with a tincture of ozone carried on the breeze, an olfactory reminder of impending rain. The storm that brewed on the horizon mirrored the tumult within me, a maelstrom of uncertainty and vulnerability, made all the fiercer by my growing connection to James. Since the moment our paths intertwined, a connection born of unexpected intimacy and silent promises, I have been untangling the skeins of my own heart, unwinding emotions I had believed forever ensconced within the vault of my psyche. Thus positioned, I heard his footsteps, a deliberate cadence, each step a negotiation with the wooden planks beneath, as he approached without announcing himself. "Deborah," James began, his voice a low rumble, resonant but almost swallowed by the wind. There lingered an unspoken question in his utterance of my name, a timbre replete with apologetic hesitance. The sight of him, standing so close, yet paradoxically distant, did not quicken my pulse in the way naivety might expect. Instead, it steadied me, his presence a lighthouse guiding my tempest-seized vessel to shore. His face, a light under the pale glow of the night, revealed a depth of quiet thoughtfulness, etched across it like lines in a map only I could decipher. "You shouldn't stand too close to the edge," he added, every word weighed as though life's essence depended on precision. I turned to him, the world slipping into softer focus. "I'm not sure what edge I fear more, James," I replied, my voice carrying an edge of whimsy that belied the truth entrenched beneath. "The one behind me, or the one ahead?" A faint smile, genuine, unvarnished, pulled against his serious demeanor. It was a moment of levity, a shard of light slicing through our shared gravitas. Perhaps, he mused, it's neither about facing the edge nor avoiding it. He stepped closer, warmth emanating from him like a confession veiled in heat. As his hand found mine, any hesitation melted away, and the coolness of his skin aligned with my own. A conduit of words left unspoken. The secrets we harbor, he said softly, are not chains, Deborah. They're keys, if we have the courage to use them. His eyes held mine, those fathomless depths unfurling stories long hidden beneath the surface. I studied him, the dichotomy within, a paradox made flesh. James, with his commanding presence and disarming tenderness, had propelled me into this sea of transformational currents, where my heart and mind engaged in a ceaseless pas de deux. Do you believe it's as simple as that? I asked, probing gently, keening to parse the veiled admissions between us. Another pause, another glance. His eyes spoke volumes, pages turning in the silence. Simple isn't what I'd call it, he capitulated, a trace of laughter threading his words. But here now, I've realized that vulnerability isn't a curse. It's a mirror, sometimes reflecting the truest parts of ourselves. Silently, I considered his words, each syllable a pebble cast into the depths, causing ripples through my thoughts. His admission curled around my own vulnerabilities, an embrace that was neither possessive nor demanding, but simply present. James, I began, my voice now the whisper of night upon the sea, have you ever wondered if vulnerability could also be a form of power? The question hung between us, a tether that neither sought nor required an anchor. We both retreated to the solace of contemplation, a lull before the storm. The sea was with us, patient as ever, breathing a rhythm that set the cadence of our emerging trust. Each wave breaking against the ship became a metaphor, a chorus that sang of transformation and the rewriting of fates. Power, he said at length, managing gently despite the weight of his words, isn't always about control, Deborah. Sometimes it's found in surrender. His gaze was unwavering, clandestinely tender. Where others offered comfort, he offered understanding. In his eyes, I found a reflection not of my doubts, but of possibilities uncharted and exquisite, a landscape unfurling, just beyond the horizon of certainty. It was an understanding we shared without speaking, without sound, an alchemy of intense dreamt upon the open sea that seemed to foreshadow a new chapter. The wind gathered around us, and I leaned against the shared touch, secure in vulnerability's embrace. The spectral outline of the storm on the horizon seemed to retreat, not in defeat, but in conference, perhaps cognizant of our presence on the precipice of change. Before the silence could swallow more than we had offered, James pivoted slightly, looking past me into the expanse of the night. Do you ever think about what you'd choose if you weren't a psychologist? He ventured, words laden with a serenity that gave room for discovery. I smiled, the lightness of laughter in my voice. Perhaps a cartographer, I said, mirthful, charting the uncharted. His chuckle returned as a velvet echo, and without thinking, I squeezed his hand, a silent benediction. Our moment, suspended between then and now, harbored the simplicity of being, without the complexities overbearing it. The ship continued its journey, the path unknown, yet the passage steady. Each moment augmented the understanding between us, promising yet unknown synchronicities as the moon danced among the clustered stars. In the quiet, with the sea grasping ceaselessly at shores unspoken, I tasted the salt of revelation on my tongue. The acknowledgement of our shared vulnerability was more liberating than binding, as comforting as the home I recognized within another for the first time. As the midnight waters clothed us in their gentle sway, I murmured the only cautionary truth of which I was certain. Our compass is our choice, James, I said, certain that as the storms tested us, they would not define us. His answer marked the close of our confession, a trust equaled, not won, but revealed. Then let's choose wisely, Deborah, he replied, his words a promise writ in the language of breath and salt. And for the first time since the journey commenced, I understood that our destinies were not etched in the stars, but forged in the hands that held, truthfully, each other. Certainly, here is chapter 69 of Conquered Desires. Deborah, 69, Unraveling Layers of Forgiveness. The sea's embrace had always offered solace, its rhythmic pulse reminding me of the constancy that life rarely afforded. Yet now, as I stood on the ship's deck, its vast expanse mirrored my own turbulent introspection. The sun dipped slowly beyond the horizon, casting long shadows that wove together like delicate threads across the wooden planks. Salt-laden air caressed my cheek, and I closed my eyes, if only to absorb the moment's ethereal beauty. The thud of footsteps broke the ocean's hypnotic spell. I didn't need to glance back to know it was James. His presence was like a silent gust, shifting the air before him. The weight of his unspoken words hung between us as he approached, each step deliberate yet hesitant, as though wrestling with unshed truths. "Deborah," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to harmonize with the distant waves. There was a gravity to it, an uncharacteristic vulnerability that compelled me to meet his gaze. In the softening light, I observed his expression, each line shadowed yet distinct. His eyes, dark and fathomless, contained an intensity that steadied and unsettled me in equal measure. Silence stretched between us, not oppressive, but inviting, a canvas upon which we could paint our shared histories and future dreams. "It seems the sea has moods," I remarked, leaning into the railing. I toyed with the metal beneath my fingertips, its coldness grounding. "A perfect reflection of us, perhaps?" James chuckled, a genuine sound that momentarily lightened the atmosphere. "I prefer to believe it's because we carry it within us, an eternal ebb and flow we can't quite escape." His metaphor resonated deeper than I cared to admit. Our dynamic was indeed a tide, sometimes unpredictable, but always persistent. He stepped closer, his presence a potent force I could neither ignore nor deny. "We've both done things we aren't proud of, Deborah. Actions that left scars, but what are regrets if not reminders of our capacity to learn, to forgive?" His words lingered in the air, whispering against unvoiced fears. Forgiveness, an imposing concept when examined closely, yet utterly necessary. I turned to face him, studying his profile as the dying light painted it with a golden tint. I reached for his hand, a tentative offering, our fingers interlaced naturally, like the weaving of our own stories, complex and incomplete. "Do you think it's naive?" I asked, the question curling between us, fragile yet defined, to believe forgiveness absolves us? He squeezed my hand gently, his thumb brushing over my knuckles in a gesture of reassurance. "Absolution is just a word. Forgiveness, however, is a practice. It allows us to move forward, to shed the weight of what once was." His insight bore into me, exposing that underneath our past grievances lay a mutual understanding I hadn't fully appreciated until this moment. We were alike in our flawed humanity, yet that was precisely where our strength lay, in our determination to rise above it. A light breeze teased loose strands of my hair, which danced with the rhythm of the growing dusk. I caught sight of the moon's reflection on the water, a silver trail leading into the unknown. "James, there's something we should both admit," I mused, attempting to uncoil the knot binding my chest. "We've been hiding behind half-truths. We need to confront them." James's response was immediate, his posture straightening as if bracing for a long-rehearsed speech. "I orchestrated what happened, Deborah, not because I intended harm, but as a misguided attempt to correct a perceived injustice. I see now that it was wrong." The confession unfurled between us, no longer a specter lurking at the periphery, but a tangible revelation to be dealt with. My heart tender yet resolute, absorbed the honesty of his admission. And I started slowly, the weight of my own declarations pressing against my tongue, was complicit in remaining silent, afraid, perhaps, of confronting the very foundation upon which we built this, us. For a moment we stood, the world around us suspended. I felt the shift, subtle yet profound, the roots of our connection winding tighter, stronger, deeper. His face was a tapestry of relief and something akin to hope. "Do you still think you're in control of this game?" I teased, a glimmer of mischief playing in my voice. His laughter echoed, a warm, rich sound that felt like the first light of dawn. "I've never been in control, Deborah. Not since you walked into my world with that fiery spirit of yours." Our shared laughter resonated across the deck, each note a pledge of our newfound selves. The world had not changed. We had. A sea of forgiven pasts lay behind us. The open horizon beckoned. "Shall we write our own rules, then?" I suggested, raising an eyebrow as our laughter subsided, settling into a serene tranquility. James nodded, his gaze as steadfast and bright as the North Star. Together. A new understanding reverberated through my being, a quiet revolution of sorts. We had unspooled the threads of forgiveness, woven them into the very fabric of our unfolding narrative. As the first stars pierced the indigo canopy above, I realized we weren't merely afloat on this ocean. We were steering towards our destiny, an adventure yet to be charted. The ship moved with us, anchored by shared purpose and unspoken promises. And as I leaned into James's embrace, the promise of a new dawn lay nestled in the chapters yet to come. And with that, we turned towards our new beginning, hand in hand, charting an unbroken path across the wild, open waters of our shared horizon. This chapter captures Deborah's introspective journey toward embracing forgiveness, offering an intimate glimpse into their complex relationship and shared resolve. Chapter 70, Emotional Overflows Revealed. "Do you believe in fate, Deborah?" James asked, his voice a gravelly melody scrawled against the evening air, filled with unspoken histories and guarded promises. While it was commonplace for him to pose such open-ended questions, this one bore an unfamiliar weight, an underlying yearning that made me pause. I lifted my gaze from the soft-lit horizon just beyond the grand windows of the ship's observation deck. The remnants of a sinking sun spilled over the endless sea, gilding the water with the blush of faded copper. The ship moaned quietly, the echo a gentle sigh carried by the wind. "Fate," I mused aloud, a smile touching the corner of my lips. "It's a convenient excuse, perhaps, but I'm not one for preordained paths." Yet, despite my words, his query lingered, sparking an ember of introspection. He stood nearby, a silhouette cut against the waning light, his posture imbued with a fortitude as enduring as the tides. James, with his knowing looks and commanding presence, held himself like a monument to unseen forces. I often felt the pull of that presence, its gravitational lure undeniable and at times disarming. I shifted my focus away from him, lest he catch my momentary lapse of restraint, and drew in a slow breath, the scent of salt and possibility mingling with the rich tone of his cologne, a heady mix that danced around the edge of familiarity. "Why ask now?" I ventured, aware of how his presence conjured complexities within me, the delicate balance between curiosity and caution wavering dangerously. As a psychologist, questions were my tools, but with him, every query seemed to unearth a deeper layer of an intricate dance neither of us dared to name. He hesitated, the silence between us taut with unspoken truths, before finally breaking it with a low chuckle as raw as it was gentle. "Because sometimes," he replied, "it feels like we're part of a story written long before we were born, a tale waiting for us to discover ourselves in it." His words sunk into me, carving tender paths through the hardened walls I had carefully erected over the years. There was a vulnerability there, layered beneath his unwavering strength, like a hidden cove revealed only to the discerning eye. James and I had waded into uncharted waters, each realizing the tumult the other harbored. The very air around us thrummed with a tension born not from conflict, but from the quiet revelation of shared longing, an emotional intimacy that frightened even as it comforted. I stepped closer, drawn inexorably toward him by a force I could neither name nor deny. The floor creaked softly beneath the echo of my steps, a gentle rhythm proclaiming our seclusion amidst so much open sea. We stood together, the distance between us hardly a breath. His eyes, a rich earthy brown, caught mine. A conversation carried on the mere meeting of glances. His expression was impenetrable, yet those eyes bore depths of emotion unplummeted by any casual onlooker. "Do you ever fear what we might find?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the whisper of the gathering night. He reached out then, his hand finding mine, open and unforced. The warmth of his touch was a homecoming, an acknowledgement of truths we both danced around. Fingers entwined, he said, "Fear? Perhaps, but I've learned that fear is simply part of the journey we take towards understanding." His words were balm and storm, exposing the currents of warmth and tumult within. Reflexively, I turned my hand in his, an unspoken pledge of understanding, my fear paired with hope. As the shadows thickened, cloaking us in their embrace, I leaned against the large window, the cool glass pressing against the bare skin of my shoulder. Outside, the sky turned to velvet, studded with distant pearls of light. The stars, far off yet constant, offered comfort in their faraway beauty. "There are things you don't know," he admitted, the admission carrying beneath it a tide of confession and regret, echoes of actions taken in the dark. Things about me, about what led us here. I did not flinch, even as turmoil and trust collided within me. His secrets were a living entity, one that weighed between us, omnipresent and potent. Yet the truth carved its path, slow as the relentless wearing away of stone by water, a process that once begun could not be undone. "I have my own shadows, James," I replied, ensuring my voice held the strength of truth. "Understanding transcends the superficial. It's about shattering illusions and embracing the humanity beneath." He nodded, as if the admission granted us some unspeakable grace, and perhaps it did. In that suspended space, we were neither judge nor confessor, just two souls embarked on a voyage beyond the horizon. A lingering glance, a hushed agreement, and as the ship continued its voyage, we remained, woven into the fabric of each other's existence. Our words echoed the quiet storm within, overflows of emotion, revealing more than conversation alone could convey. A bond. In that known silence, I felt a shift, an inexplicable realignment of the universe within. With James beside me, I was willing to brave the unknown, drawn toward a mosaic of fate, fear, and the seductive promise of understanding. "Together, then," he said, his voice holding that ineffable promise, carrying us both toward the unseen future. And so we journeyed onward, as one. Chapter 71. Resilience Through Deepening Ties. The vexing broil of the horizon seemed almost premonitory, a bruise of colors stretching across the evening sky, muttering of things left unsaid. I watched the sea's deceptive calm from the small porthole of my quarters, its gentle rise and fall akin to the rhythms of a heart not easily unraveled. The ship, a metal leviathan, groaned and creaked along its course, much like the unspoken tension that had nested within me, born as curiosity, of need, of the swirl of emotions that James ignited, even as they danced firefly-like at the edge of propriety. Introspection rarely left me satisfied. Tonight, it felt like an overblown candle stub, waning, yet feverishly alight with questions. How much of my identity still belonged solely to me? How much had shifted, divvied into pieces by James's enigmatic presence? Would shadows turned unfamiliar ever reconcile with the light, or were they forever at odds? Dismissing my reverie, I rose from the leather chair, its worn edges cool under the press of my fingers, and moved towards the dimly lit corridor. The whisper of my feet against the wood was oddly comforting in its predictability, a stark contrast to the unpredictability tethered to the man who waited beyond the confines of my thoughts. The door was ajar as I reached it, a glowing slit across the darkened hallway. James's quarters bore the scent of sandalwood, the aroma lingering like an embrace, wrapping around me as I stepped across the threshold. The room was a tableau of muted elegance, book-lined shelves, a desk orderly in its intentions, a decanter of golden liquid shimmering in the lamplight with unshed secrets. He was by the window, silhouetted against the fading light. James turned, an indelible stillness about him, an oak among saplings in his composed stance. A moment unfurling between us, neither oppressive nor retreating, spoke wordlessly of the bond we've shared through tumult and quietude alike. "Forgive the intrusion," I offered in measured tones, though the words felt inadequate. James inclined his head, a subtle acknowledgement that I was always welcome in his space. A trust unspoken, yet resolute. "The sea," he remarked after a pause, his voice an arc of sound, threading the silence, "reminds me of all things we cannot control." "And what is it you seek to control, James?" My inquiry, though gentle, probed deeper than the ocean's immeasurable depths. He regarded me with eyes that seemed to absorb the dim light rather than reflect it. In the silence that stretched between us, an understanding blossomed, one neither easily rendered nor hastily defined. "Sometimes it is not control," he said finally, "but understanding, Deborah. And there's much I am still learning. A sidestep around truths not easily reconciled, a dance familiar to us both." We had become masters at navigating the sinews of our own vulnerabilities. It was a skill fostered by mutual trust, by choice, never coercion. The conversation languished into a companionable silence as I moved towards the window, issuing an unstated invitation for his thoughts to intertwine with mine. Outside, the world was softened by dusk's quietude, as though the heavens played a lullaby only the observant could perceive. "I think," I hesitated, feeling the weight of each word's potential. "When we first met, the world you inhabited seemed composed of walls insurmountable. But now I instead see echoes of bridges." James's smile, a rare flicker, gilded his features. "You have always seen beyond the confines of mere structures, Deborah. Therein resides your power." I nodded in mutual respect for the truths exchanged, their foundations opulent in their simplicity. He reached for the decanter, pouring a measure of scotch into a glass, his movements fluid as he offered the glass to me. The liquid warmth seeping through the crystal was a reminder, a tether binding us within this transient haven amidst chaos. "You know," I began, tracing the rim of the glass with reverence, "this journey has a way of reframing all I once thought certain." My gaze met his, defiant yet willing, a testament to the paths untrodden and promises sown amidst dust and dreams. He took a step forward, nothing aggressive, merely the closing of distance between two souls adrift in understanding. "And when all redefining converges, what remains?" The question hung suspended in the air, a challenge and an invitation both. I answered not with words, but in closing the space between us further, setting the glass aside as I lingered at the precipice of a reckoning. "Us," I whispered at last, "we remain." In the ensuing silence, more was spoken than 100 tongues might utter aloud. Our entanglement was one of reciprocity, encompassing all, a fortitude forged in the fires of vulnerability, unyieldingly resilient. And as James raised the glass in a silent toast to whatever the morrow would bring, I knew with clarity both illuminating and vast, that together we were fundamentally whole, each a bridge to the other's transformation. Our futures poised beyond confines, unwavering as the sea. Chapter 72. Renewal after Revelation. "Why do you trust me now, after everything?" James's voice threaded through the whistling morning wind that swept across the ship's deck. the lingering night mist dissolving into a dawn that crept uncertainly over the horizon. His question hung between us like a tangible thing, buoyed by the salty air. It was a question I had asked myself in countless permutations, dissecting each unfurling nuance of our tumultuous seaborne entanglement. My heart, ordinarily so resolute and pragmatic, felt newly forged in this tempest of emotion and revelation. Here, with the vessel's slow rise and fall beneath my feet, and the ocean vastness enveloping us, his words reverberated against a softened sky, a canvas washed with pale washes of blue and whispers of silver-lined clouds. I wrapped my coat tighter against the chill, considering how to answer him in a way that unveiled truth while holding something back, a refuge for my own vulnerabilities. Because I realized, I said slowly, my breath visible in the crisp air, that truth is a fluid thing, shaped by perspective and need. It's not just the past that matters now, but what we choose to carry forward. I watched him digest my words, his gaze steady on mine, like an anchor fixing me in a roiling sea. The ship's rhythm became a heartbeat at the center of this discourse, and I noticed how the morning light caught the hint of soft stubble on his chin, giving his contemplative face an air of unfinished business, much like the story we were part of now. Perspective and need, he repeated, his voice almost carried away by the gust. He rubbed his hands together, then let them fall at his sides, a gesture of openness. I was blind to my own need, Deborah, but never oblivious, not when it comes to you. There was no dissembling in his tone, no hidden agendas cloaked in his words. Still, layers were always present in our interactions, adding textures to this burgeoning intimacy. As I observed him, a memory of our initial meeting stirred, a fierce chess match of minds veiled beneath the guise of professional duty. Yet here, unguarded in the creeping dawn, something fundamental shifted, as if the world tilted on its axis, aligning with a truth that was ours alone. I turned my gaze to the horizon, where the sun, like a golden sentinel, crowned the world with its light. It redefined the night's obscurities, unveiling fresh paths illuminated with patient glow. This, I gestured to the sea's endless expanse, an invisible boundary of possibilities. This place does something to a person's mind, makes what's true and what's hidden clearer. James's eyes followed mine, tracing the early morning light painting trails across the limitless ocean. In silence, his proximity became palpable, a warmth that belied the briskness of early day. I understood that this was an acceptance, the kind that arrives not in grand declarations, but in the simple, unwavering presence of another. You taught me more about trust than I wanted to understand, he admitted, his voice rich and textured, like the rolling timbre of a distant brass horn. It terrified me, and it still does. But here, with all that's laid bare, I find myself willing to try. The breeze carried the scent of salt and something damp and green from the island our voyage circled. His fingers brushed mine. It was not a mighty gesture, but a small, tangible tether amidst our uncertainty. Yet it welled within me a profound sense of peace, a different kind of safety than I had ever known, born from acknowledgement rather than illusion. I never imagined trusting someone would feel like this, I said, and my voice broke, not with fear, but with the unexpected sweetness of release. The confession was our dawn, a renewal, as we stood on the precipice of new understanding. Perhaps, he murmured, his gaze never wavering, trusting is just another form of hope, something neither of us has had in abundance until now. We stood encompassed by the immensity of the sea and sky, two figures woven into the fabric of a story spun from trust and revelation. Here, where the boundaries of the known seemed endlessly mutable, I understood that renewal was not merely turning the page, but crafting a new one altogether, a testament to the resilience of spirit and the courage found in genuine connection. It's enough, I whispered, and my words carried with them the weight and the lightness of beginnings. And in James's answering embrace, gentle and true, I found an affirmation that transcended doubt, a partnership unbound by the limits of lone travels. Yes, this was enough, more than enough to steer us towards the shore of future days. As the sun climbed higher, banishing the last of the early mist, I knew this journey was just beginning, and whatever lay ahead, it would be navigated together. The resonance of our existence intertwined, and the truth we held was ours alone, bright and unyielding amidst the world's shadows. "May this be our voyage," he said, his voice low, a promise soaked in the nascent sunlight. And so it became as surely as the dawn, our hopes and our fears entwined, carried forward by the inexorable tide toward whatever awaited, confident in the strength of what we had now chosen to become. Certainly. Here is Chapter 73 of Conquered Desires. Chapter 73, Reshaping Desirous Dynamics. The gentle hum of the ship encompassed me as I stared at the modest sea-green clay pot cradled in my hands. Its surface was smooth, cool to the touch, yet its heft weighed heavily in my grasp, like the gravitas of unspoken sentiments. James had entrusted it to me, a simple gift woven from a delicate tapestry of quiet meaning, a source of pride in his Nigerian heritage, and a silent nod of trust between us. In the dim, gold-tinged lighting of the cabin, I placed the pot carefully on the wooden desk, its presence anchoring the room's disparate elements into harmony. A lighthouse amidst the storm-tossed nautical chaos. The muted creaking of the ship's timbers and the distant calls of gulls outside the cabin complemented the rhythmic lullaby of waves kissing the vessel's hull. It was an afternoon transcending the boundaries of time, cradling stillness amid the tumult. James stood across from me, his silhouette sharp against the cabin's solitary window. The sun's descent painted the sea with strokes of amber and coral, and its dying warmth caressed his profile with a fleeting tenderness. The silence between us was substantive, a dialogue of breath and thought as laden as spoken words. He watched, diligent and contemplative, the depth of his watchfulness as palpable as the charged air. I could feel myself navigating the interstitial space between who I had been and who I was becoming. This entire ship a potent metaphor for my own uncharted voyage. My life had been one of careful, precise actions, akin to a surgeon's intricate cuts. But with James, there was room for error, for spontaneity, and for letting loose once tightly wound fears. "Thank you," I finally said, my voice barely a ripple in our shared silence. The words lingered between us, absorbing into the wood-paneled walls, the ship carrying them forward like a vessel of unpolished truth. James leaned back slightly. The subtle creak of his movements and the deep intent in his eyes communicated expectations unspoken, yet understood. Here was a man accustomed to navigating perilous waters, both literal and metaphorical, who now chose to tether his course to mine without presumption. His understated smile was an invitation, an acknowledgement of the voyage embarked with no visible compass but shared resolve. "You speak as though I bestowed upon you something weightier than a pot." "Perhaps you have." I allowed my gaze to slide past him, fixing on the violet horizon beyond the cabin, a mingling of day and night. "It's more than it appears, like you." His eyes met mine, a flash of something. Was it surprise? Illuminated their depths. In this vulnerable admission, I felt a liberation from the need to veil my thoughts with professional caution. James shifted his stance, absorbed in contemplation, the flicker of a lantern's flame echoing in his gaze. "You harbor questions," he stated, a statement more than an inquiry, edged with readiness to engage in a convened honesty. "I do." In the declaration, my skepticism didn't submit. "More questions than answers." He nodded, a tacit understanding unfolding between us like a well-worn map of familiar constellations amidst an alien sky. "Then let's navigate them together." We'll set no course without your say, without your desires leading us." I smiled at this, an expression unpracticed yet natural. "I believe you, James." The sound of the waves against the ship reminded me of the heartbeat beneath my skin, a symphony that resonated with the life teeming with emotions I had long restrained. They surged, chaotic yet beautiful, carving new channels of understanding. I asked, unsure why the question tumbled forth now of all moments. "Do you ever think of home?" A silence stretched between us, not empty but pregnant with meaning. Then, wrapped in a protective composure, he spoke. "Home is a complicated word. It's not a place or a time for me, but a feeling. It's what we shape, what we risk." "Do you think this," I gestured between us, woven threads linking disparate existences, "could become that place for both of us?" His eyes were firm, yet the vulnerability edged beneath them bared authenticity greater than spoken assurance. "If you wish it, then it already is." And somehow, amidst the constants of trepidation and tumult, this breathed life into our choice, a shared desire to reshape the undeniable dynamics between us. His hand reached out, firm yet tender. I accepted, feeling the grounding solidity of him, a mutual anchoring in the midst of this uncertain journey. Being desired, seeing wished-for truths come to life, these were sentiments I had never permitted myself to fully entertain, and yet here they were, vibrant and tangible, much like the horizon eventide painted with possibilities. "It's time," he said softly, words knitted with purpose and tenderness. The simplicity expanded, casting complexity into our reality, shaping desire no longer unvoiced. With a measured sigh, I accepted the destination of this particular stretch of sea, laying aside fears still formidable, yet no longer insurmountable. We stood together, poised on the brink of a profound undertaking, uncharted yet embraced, a testament to untamed dynamics that reshaped who we were, shaping who we could become. And as daylight surrendered to night's embrace, so too did I, stepping with him into that quiet revelation, weaving the thread of our shared journey onto the vast canvas of an uncertain, but open to be claimed tomorrow. The chapter closes with the promise of alternating silence and understanding, rippling like ocean currents under a limitless sky, leaving the audience to ponder the depth of unspoken connections and the horizonless potential they hold. Chapter 74, The Power of Shared Self. The scent of salt hung thickly in the air, a fitting harbinger of the heaviness in my heart. The incessant undulation of the sea seemed to echo the unseen turmoil within me. I stood at the bow of the ship, allowing the brisk wind to whip my hair into a frenzy, as if the elements themselves were conspiring to mirror the tempest swirling inside. The horizon lay before me, an indefinite line in a realm where the sky met the ocean, holding secrets as deeply embedded as my own. James appeared beside me, his presence as palpable as the air we breathed. His voice held a cadence that caressed and prodded at once. Thoughts adrift on the waves? His words, deceptively casual, wrapped around me like tendrils, seeking to unravel the tapestry of my silent contemplations. I turned to meet his gaze, his eyes a shade of ebony warmed by the setting sun. In that moment, the look we shared was an embrace, far more intimate than any touch. The world around us faded, leaving only the insistence of his eyes, probing the chambers of my heart, demanding honesty in their quiet strength. "Perhaps," I finally replied, allowing my voice to be carried by the breeze, my words both admission and deflection. The air between us seemed to hum with an electricity that defied the visible world, a force that had drawn me to him despite every rational caution. It was not merely the lure of danger, but the promise of something deeper, richer, a connection unburdened by the false veneers of societal expectation. A moment of silence enveloped us, marked only by the rhythmic slap of waves against the ship's hull. I could feel the burgeoning question between us, as surely as the spray upon my skin. What did it mean, this dance we found ourselves in? Clearly, it was not born of necessity nor whimsy. It was the urging of our very souls, a symphony played out on the strings of destiny. His hand brushed against mine in a gesture so gentle, so achingly conscious, that it startled the breath from my lungs. There was power in that mere touch, a silent ode to the promise of protection, a whisper of solidarity amidst the chaos of desire and revelation. Deborah. His voice was a soft invocation, but beneath it lay a thread of something urgent, almost pleading. I can see it. Whatever you're wrestling with, share the weight with me. For a moment, words escaped me, tangled in the complex web of longing and fear. But his sincerity was an unwavering tether, urging me to voice the unspoken. It's not, I whispered, something easily shared. His brow furrowed, a testament to the restrained intensity of his care. Do you fear what remains unspoken, or do you fear what speaking might demand of us? My pulse quickened, the question striking with uncanny precision at the heart of my hesitation. I had always believed my fears were mine alone to bear, yet here he stood, offering refuge and risk in equal measure. I turned my gaze back to the sea, its depths unfathomable, much like our entwined fates. Perhaps both, I admitted, the confession escaping into the wind with unmistakable vulnerability. James was silent for a beat, a deep exhalation signaling his contemplation. The evening light settled around us, casting him in chiaroscuro relief, vulnerability and strength contained within a single form. We are more, he finally said, than the sum of our fears. And this, his hand gestured between us, holds power by our choice, not by circumstance. His words embraced the unyielding ache within me, offering solace even as they ignited a deeper contemplation of what lay beneath our desire. Choices, consequences, commitment. The realization settled over me with the weight of inevitability. Those choices were mine, even as they were woven intricately with his own in this complex dance. I'm not afraid of sharing the weight, I spoke softly, but with growing resolve, the emotional resonance gathering strength within my voice. I'm afraid of what we might unearth together. His lips curved with a gentle understanding that was neither condescending nor presumptive. Isn't the potential for revelation why we're here? The notion sat like a newly discovered truth between us, the magnitude of its significance dawning with unexpected clarity. Here, amidst the sea's vast emptiness, was a possibility not of surrender to another's will, but of mutual acknowledgement and affirmation. The ship shifted beneath our feet, the motion neither abrupt nor disconcerting, but a subtle reminder of the perpetual motion carrying us onward. James' presence was a steadiness amidst that relentless journey, a quiet strength that infused the fabric of what we were becoming. In that moment, witnessing ocean and sky embrace in hues of twilight, I made a choice born not of fear, but of desire to embrace the shared self we were gradually uncovering. These whispers of possibility demanded listening, not burial in the sands of doubt. His voice, a low, compelling murmur, reached for me once more, a lifeline to the path we'd yet to fully traverse. Trust in the power of shared self, Deborah. Trust in us. It was an invitation and a challenge in equal measure, one that called to my spirit and unfurled the intricacies of what we could become. With a slow nod, I met his gaze once more, allowing the renewed understanding to suffuse every corner of my being. Here we stood on the precipice of the unknown, with truth as our compass and shared intent as our guide. Together we turned to face the horizon, a boundless expanse filled not with fear, but with the promise of discovery. Anew, I whispered, the certainty of that single word marking the dawn of our shared exploration. End chapter 74. Chapter 75. A profound role reversal. What if it's all been a game? James's voice was a low murmur, drifting over the muted clinking of porcelain cups. The question hung between us like a riddle seeking its answer in the erratic dance of sunlight through the ship's cabin windows. Steam curled beneath my chin as I raised the cup to my lips, the fragrance of nettle tea coiling upward, subtly grounding the moment. Though our conversation was meant as a morning reprieve, an ordinary exchange across a breakfast table, it had somehow slipped into the extraordinary. I felt the gentle pull of uncertainty and intrigue, as one might feel the unexpected current beneath placid waters. Isn't life in itself a game of sorts, James? With its moves and counter-moves, its stakes? For a heartbeat, our eyes met, and in that brief collision, I sensed the dense whirl of thoughts beneath his steady exterior. A flicker, perhaps too swift for words, revealed an unguarded side, a seam in his armor that both enticed and unsettled me. "You're not the same as when you arrived," he remarked, his voice slipping into deeper timbres, resonating against the wooden panels around us. "You've changed. Now you've got the look of someone who won't be played." It was a challenge, yet filled with a nuance of admiration, as if he saw within me a reflection of strength that matched his. His gaze was unwavering, a ribbon of amber in the morning light, and I felt its warmth tracing an unspoken path across the contours of my face. "I wasn't asking permission to redefine myself," I replied, setting the cup down with a measured grace, aware of the tremor threading through my words. I searched for an anchor in the room's quiet opulence, the glint of unopened silverware, the velvet napkins folded with geometric precision, each detail a veneer of order in our otherwise tumultuous progression. James's smile was a rare unveiling, shifting the air with its unexpected gentleness. "No, you wouldn't need permission for that. But I wonder, Deborah, where does this leave us?" I hesitated, drawn into the complexity of our shared narrative, at once intimate and impossible. His question, though cloaked in uncertainty, hinted at a threshold we had not yet dared to cross. "We stand at the edge of what we know," I said, my voice softening, as if in embracing this vulnerability I might coax my own truth into form. The ship swayed gently, the rhythm of the sea echoing my throbbing pulse, and I reached out almost instinctively, my fingertips brushing against his. It was a tentative contact, like the first traces of rainfall on a parched landscape. His reaction was immediate yet controlled, a brief intake of breath marking the moment's pivot. "You surprise me, Deborah. Perhaps it's your turn to lead this particular dance." And so there was an inversion, a subtle submission within James's fortitude that mirrored the storm clouds gathering at the periphery of our journey. I stood, anchoring myself in the firm conviction that here, aboard this ship where destinies converged, I would forge my own narrative, hand in hand with the pieces of his, only he dared to share. "Let me navigate then," I proposed, every word deliberate, a bridge across his unspoken reservations. "Show me the steps, and I'll find the way forward." There was an unfolding in his posture, like a sculpture re-annealing itself. He leaned back, relinquishing the reins with a rare trust. "All right, lead us to shore." His acquiescence was not an easy surrender, but a testament to the path we had carved through uncharted territories together. We passed the morning entrenched in a chess game of sorts, our moves slow yet decisive within the varnished confines of the cabin. Each piece strategically shifted, evoked dialogues barely hinted at beneath spoken phrases. Like sea creatures submerged, their presence felt more than seen. As my bishop claimed his knight, I noted the slight crinkle shadowing his brow, a hint of gentle frustration that he could not completely disguise. "You play with a ruthless precision," he noted, a note of appreciation threaded through an otherwise neutral observation. "You taught me well," I replied, amusement tinging my voice, a laughter unspoken but vividly shared. Our game wasn't just of strategy, but communion, a testament to our continual evolution, from adversaries to confidants. "I wonder if these roles have always existed within us," he mused aloud. Was it destiny or mere happenstance that brought them forward? The question lingered like incense in the air, its quiet potency irrevocably shifting the narrative of our morning. I leaned forward, grounding myself with the cusp of his chin in the palm of my hand, seeking the answer in the unfathomable depths of his eyes. "What if it doesn't matter? What matters then?" His words brushed against my fingers, as softly as his own resolve. That we continue carving out this new terrain, trusting that together we'll find our way. It was a promise and a challenge, binding us to the unknown with more potency than any declaration ever could. Where destiny faltered, choice took precedence, weaving a tapestry of possibilities. Sighing deeper into the moment, James tilted his face to mine, his expression an intertwining of challenge and concession. "Then lead us into this new world, Deborah," he breathed. And I felt the fervor of his trust, like a warm, resplendent current, unfurling across my skin. My hand reached for his, our fingers interlocking in a gesture both simple and profound, each curve and line an intertwining of histories rewritten. We were evolving, not just separate entities offloading our burdens, but intertwined souls navigating the vast expanse of desire and duty. I sensed the rhythm of change beneath the footfall of every heartbeat, each one resonating through the wooden floors and walls like an unyielding testament. Together, our pasts and futures interwoven, we journeyed into the uncharted realms of trust and revelation. When James spoke again, it was with an intimacy as yet unimagined. "Promise me one thing, Deborah. Anything. That you'll stay true to who you're becoming." His words etched into the quiet like a votive inscribed upon a chapel stone, inviolable and eternal. It became both a benediction and a tapestry of intentions upon which the uncertain weight of our journey was comfortably arrayed. As our grips tethered us back into this shared reality, I understood that what lay ahead did not require perfection, only patience, passion, and the willingness to be perpetually reborn. I smiled softly, bidding the recent unfamiliarity farewell and welcoming an unfathomable elation. "James, we navigate the seas towards our own becoming, and this, above all, is the greatest path we shall ever walk." As his enigmatic gaze met mine across the freshly mapped future, I knew implicitly that beneath it swelled the vast ocean of what we might yet uncover together, a story both timeless and newly born. Chapter 76: Command and Courage Interact. The morning unfolded slowly, a gentle haze hovering over the endless stretch of open water, shrouding the ship in a silken mist that seemed almost sentient, whispering secrets between the waves. I stood at the edge of the deck, the salt air brushing against my skin like a familiar caress, and I felt a curious kinship with the sea, its endless depths mirroring the growing complexity of my own emotions. The soft murmur of the ocean underpinned the symphony of the ship's machinery below, a breathing vessel of wood and steel plowing resolutely through the water. Everything here felt both ancient and immediate, like I was straddling a threshold between worlds. One foot rooted in reality, the other teetering on the edge of the vast unknown, much like my burgeoning association with James. The seagulls wheeled overhead, their cries punctuating the air with staccato notes of independence. They, at least, seemed certain of their path. I envied them that singular clarity as I wrestled with the tangled threads of duty and desire that tied my heart to this enigmatic man. James had already been up, the steam from his morning coffee weaving into the mist with the elegance of a master painter's brushstroke. It was the smell of his coffee, robust and slightly bitter, that often heralded his presence before I ever saw him. Today, that aroma still lingered in the air, an olfactory ghost of his earlier solitude. I watched him now, across the deck, his silhouette cut sharply against the morning light, filtering through the ship's sails. With hands tucked casually into his pockets, he seemed lost in thought, a figure sculpted by his own unseen burdens, yet firmly tethered to the present moment by a force of will that could command tides. I took a deep breath, the air thick with a heady mix of salt and anticipation. The conversation we were about to have felt like a precipice, the exhilarating danger of cliff-top winds urging us toward revelations unspoken. "Morning," I called, my voice steady despite the swirling uncertainty within. "Morning, Deborah," he replied, his gaze locking onto mine with a gravity that seemed to draw out the very breath from my lungs. His eyes held mysteries and promises, a kaleidoscope of intent that shifted with each nuance of light. I approached him, each step purposeful. My shoes barely made a sound against the polished wood, but the air seemed to vibrate with the unspoken energy between us, charged with possibility. "There's something on your mind," I observed, and it was an invitation, a small gift of trust wrapped in inquiry. A shadow flickered across his features, a fleeting vulnerability that softened his usual stoic mask. It was gone in an instant, replaced by that familiar intensity, but I had caught it still, a whisper of the man beneath the armor. "There's always something on my mind," he responded, his tone light, yet the weight of his words dropped between us like an anchor seeking the ocean's floor. His humility, his sharp wit, these had always been part of the intricate dance around what was and what might be. "But today it seems heavier," I pressed gently, feeling as though we stood not just on a physical deck, but at the very edge of a deeper understanding. James shifted, his movement easy, graceful, but his fingers traced a barely perceptible pattern along the railing, a texture of his thoughts rendered in absent-minded motion. "Every choice we make," he began slowly, "ripples out like these waters. We're both trying to navigate something vast and complex." I nodded, my pulse quickening at the quiet honesty in his voice. "And do you think we'll find our course?" The question hung between us, part query, part hope, like sails catching a whisper of wind. He chuckled, a warm, low sound that resonated against the wood and water. "I believe so, but only if we chart it together." I smiled then, a true smile that reached beyond the surface and lit the spaces where doubt had gathered. His words carried a promise of partnership, a subtle reassurance that whatever storm lay ahead, we'd face it as one. For a moment, silence wrapped itself around us, a quiet blanket that comforted rather than smothered. The ship glided through the mist with purpose, much like the journey we found ourselves on, bound by a thread spun from mutual respect and an undercurrent of something more profound. "James," I ventured after a pause heavy with meaning, "you've often asked me to trust you. Why don't you tell me what trust looks like from your perspective?" He glanced at me, his expression shifting between guarded introspection and gentle openness. "Trust isn't just a word, Deborah. It's in letting someone see the workings beneath the armor, knowing that what they find won't be turned into a weapon." I absorbed his words, each crafting its own resonance within me. "You mean that kind of trust is like inviting someone into your storm and believing they won't lose themselves to the tumult?" "Exactly," he replied, the word carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken stories. A tremulous breeze brushed past us, rich with the scent of the sea and promise. I realized how deeply we delved into our heart's territory, each revelation a beacon guiding us through the fog. "And what is it that you guard, James?" The question was daring, a candlelight flickering boldly in a cavernous dark. He turned his gaze back to the undulating horizon, his silhouette stark against the brightening sky. "The choices I've made," he admitted, his voice thick with the gravity of regret, yet somehow buoyed by intention. "Some haunt me, others define me, but here with you, it's as if they unfold into something resembling redemption. A touchstone moment, electric in its purity, in its bravest vulnerability. Here was James Carlyle, formidable in his own right, yet allowing cracks in his formidable facade, and those cracks gleamed with the searing beauty of truth. I reached for his hand, my fingers interlacing with his in a gesture that transcended words. The connection was living, breathing, the heartbeat between our palms, an echo of the courage it took to stand here, exposed yet unyielding. "Our course won't always be clear, will it?" I mused quietly, certain now of the voyage ahead. No, it won't, he agreed, his grip firm and reassuring. But with courage and steadfastness, we'll trace our path into clarity. The sun broke free from its shroud of clouds, casting a radiant glow over the deck, a promise of light against the ocean's endless canvas. And as I stood beside James, anchored by his presence, yet exhilarated by the possibilities, I felt the stirrings of command and courage twining within me. As our gazes met in a shared pledge, I knew we were no longer adrift in uncertainty. Together, we would navigate this journey, this adventure on the waters and within ourselves. Then onward we go, I whispered, the words an echo of intention, a testament of trust that lifted with the wind. As James nodded, the ship seemed to lean into destiny's embrace, carved familiarly by our united decisions, a testament to the indomitable spirit of two souls daring to chart uncharted waters hand in hand. Chapter 77, Passage of Trust and Truth. The morning breeze whispered softly through the crevices of the ship, carrying with it the briny tang of the ocean and the faintest hint of rosemary from the herb garden I had nurtured amidst the metal and wood of our floating haven. The herbs now sat under the circular porthole in my cabin, a small green respite against the expansive blues. It was a simple tending ritual, the pruning and watering, yet today it felt weighted with an ineffable solemnity, as if each snip of the shear could carve clarity from the chaos that roiled inside me. I leaned close, the scent of the earth recalling sunlit gardens far from these azure corridors. The cabin pulsed gently with the ship's rhythm, a constant reminder of our isolation and intimacy out here at sea. I set the clippers down and inhaled deeply, eyes closed, the room darkening momentarily. The labored breath seemed to ask questions I was not yet ready to answer. Would this introspection reveal truths I feared more than the deceit I had unknowingly harbored? The door creaked open, and a familiar presence filled the room before I registered the quiet click of it closing. James moved with a feline grace, yet his steps carried an unspoken authority, each soft scuff against the wooden floor an eloquent assertion of his dominion, not over me, not even over himself, but perhaps in a relentless pursuit of truth. "Morning," came his voice, quiet as ripples beneath a placid surface. His eyes, deep as twilight, met mine with a searching intensity that seemed keen on stripping away the layers of pretense I wore. "Morning," I replied, my voice ironically neutral against the tumult within. He lingered by the threshold, framed by light fractured by the porthole's glass, his presence a mixture of strength and restraint, as if he could step into solidity and shadow with equal ease. The unspoken lay thick between us, a gulf neither treacherous nor bridging, merely there, pulsating with its own existence. We often found ourselves here, suspended in moments where words seemed both pivotal and inconsequential, where a gesture could pivot worlds. Would he reconcile his truth with mine, or continue to thread his narrative through the fragile tapestry of our tenuous accord? "I was thinking about our conversation last night," I began, turning to face him fully, the words carrying both risk and promise. "When you mentioned," he raised a hand gently, a gesture of interrupted thought, not silencing, merely asking for pause. "Yes, it was enlightening, wasn't it?" His lips curved subtly, a half smile, or perhaps something far more complex, an encrypted message just beneath the surface. "Enlightening or shattering?" I retorted, the edge of vulnerability in my voice sharper than I'd intended. A slight flinch crossed his countenance, a glimpse into the storm his eyes often concealed. His gaze bore into mine, unflinching, deliberate. "The foundations needed shaking, Deborah. Sometimes clarity emerges only after the dust settles." I felt the words more than heard them, each syllable probing deeper, exposing naked truths we maneuvered around with practiced ambivalence. My fingers instinctively fumbled with the rosemary, a tactile distraction against the torrent his words invoked. "Trust," I said finally, my voice barely a whisper that seemed to expand within the confines of the cabin. "Yes, trust," James echoed, stepping forward, the shadows receding with each determined stride. He halted mere inches from me, his attention fixed upon the sprig of rosemary I clutched, a guardian talisman. "It hinges everything, doesn't it?" A pause cocooned us then, a space so intensely alive with the weight of possibilities and uncertainties that it felt almost sacred. I searched for anger, for resentment against his cryptic disclosures and shadowed past. Instead, there was only an abiding connection, a symbiosis that twisted and turned, matching the ship's lilt, forging new paths where the old ones crumbled underfoot. "How do you reconcile what you did?" I asked, my eyes refusing to waver from the glass of his irises, seeking entry into the cathedral of his thoughts. A moment stretched interminably before his lips parted, words unfurling like dark ribbons. "Acceptance, I suppose," knowing that each action, however misguided, was driven by what we believed was the truth at that time. I bit my lower lip, absorbing his confession, its tendrils curling around a deeper understanding of us, of the burdens borne and those shared. I released the tension with a deep exhale, the ship sheltering our mutual confessions as a temple might embrace its murmuring congregants. We stood together then, my hand brushing against his, as though drawn magnetically, seeking warmth amidst the cool resolve of intentions laid bare. His grip was gentle, anchoring, a steady hand in tumultuous seas. "It wasn't just a card game. Those moments finally brought you here," he murmured, a wistful assertion that spoke volumes in its simplicity. For the first time aboard this vast vessel, I allowed myself to lean into the truth of our shared history, a narrative not of winners or losers, but of advocates and builders. The potential for redefinition lay beneath every syllable exchanged, each silently pledged commitment between us. I held his gaze then, letting the implications settle like the twilight mist rolling over distant waters. "The passage is ours to navigate, then," I murmured softly, with a clarity that felt hard-won. His smile this time was full, genuine, a beacon promising uncharted possibilities. "Together," he confirmed, his voice the consonants my soul had long sought in its symphony. The ocean beyond our enclosure stretched endlessly, promising its own secrets and serenity. But here, in this intimate chapel of self and shared being, we found the tether in trust and truth, drawing us closer, despite the world that pressed relentlessly at our borders. In the cadence of our breaths, the unyielding steadfastness of his embrace, I discovered the fractured piece I hadn't realized was missing, sliding effortlessly into place as our destinies fully entwined. "Adventure awaits, Deborah," James whispered, and within that simple promise, I knew the future had unfolded like a sunrise, radiant, beckoning. As I clung to the warmth of his perception and his truth, a simple acknowledgement arose within me, as clear and inevitable as the horizon that awaited our journey. Yes, together. And so we dared. Chapter 78, Secrets Beyond Their Bond. The cabin hummed with the resonance of the ship cutting through the water, a relentless motion felt in the subtleties of the floorboards beneath my feet. Outside, the horizon stretched interminably, a boundary of azure bleeding into obscurity, the sea's salt-laden breath whispering through the porthole. The late afternoon sun pooled upon the polished wood of the desk, casting elongated shadows that seemed to sway with the rhythm of the ocean, a rhythmic testament to our journey, physically and emotionally. As I sat opposite James, the weight of an unspoken tension coiled between us, palpable as the air we shared. His eyes, dark as the depths through which we sailed, lingered on papers scattered across the table, manifests and maritime records that seemed absurdly mundane against the gravity of what had unfolded over recent days. "You don't have to say it," James finally broke the quiet, his voice a low murmur, infused with a restraint learned through habit rather than nature. The sea must have echoed in his veins, I thought, an endless, unpredictable expanse. I watched him, the man who had defied expectation and reason, who had stepped into the spaces between my assumptions with a quiet audacity that had left me breathless. There's a part of me that doesn't want to believe it. Perhaps I was safer when things remained hidden, I admitted, the candor settling like a truth between us. James leaned back, the chair creaking as if in response. Safety is a fragile thing, Deborah. We offer it to ourselves like a shield, but it's only as strong as the secrets it conceals. I nodded, absorbing the weight of his words. In the silence that followed, I could almost hear the echo of our collective pasts. Lives lived like open seas, winds unpredictable, destinations uncertain. We were driven by currents unseen, hopes and desires that faltered and surged, only to be met by the promise of what lay beyond. Minutes passed like hours, the ship's steady progress a silent count to the rapid beating of my heart. I sifted through the papers, seeking meaning amidst the chaos. The notes and letters, evidence of a life I had been tasked to evaluate, understand, and ultimately, in ways unanticipated, love. Tucked within them was a letter from the captain, its edges creased and worn by time. It spoke of a child, a secret hidden beneath layers of duty and obligation, waiting to unravel the fabric of our reality. Have you known all along? I ventured, the question a whisper between us. James hesitated, his fingers tracing the line of the grain in the table, an unspoken language all its own. I suspected. The captain, he's a man who wears loyalty and distrust like armor. He trusts very few with the truth. And yet now, in these days where every horizon seems to alter, why now? The query felt layered with subtext, tinged by the multitude of questions it encapsulated. About us, about courage and risk, about choosing what remains unsaid until it's necessary to forge forward. Perhaps because sometimes we must lay ourselves bare in order to move forward, he replied, his gaze finally on mine, unshaken and solemn. Out here in this vast world, vulnerability becomes a kind of strength. A realization washed over me, an unspoken understanding of the interconnectedness of pasts and futures, of choice and consequence. I could taste the salt in the air more vividly, feel the ship's wood beneath my fingertips, as if it pulsed with its own heartbeat beneath my touch, its journey mirroring our own. His hand settled over the table, inviting and steady, a gesture of reassurance as much as companionship. Deborah, whatever unfolds, we face it together. In that moment, everything outside this room felt distant, the world beyond the thin bulkheads insubstantial compared to the gravity of our connection. The ship sailed onward, but in that intimate cocoon, nothing mattered but the truth as we saw it. The choices still left to make in the quiet revolution of discovery. Every revelation about James carved deeper into the enigma I had sought to unravel since our first encounter. Yet each mystery uncovered drew me further into the complexities of his world, a world I had willingly chosen to enter, enticed by the promise of understanding him. There's more, isn't there? I stated rather than asked, feeling threads of anticipation woven into the fabric of our discourse. His sigh was almost imperceptible, a gust against the backdrop of our intricate interplay. There always is, Deborah. Perhaps the greatest secret is that discovery is relentless, and it demands courage. I listened to his words, reverberating through the silence of the room, a siren's call echoing back the truths I'd begun to acknowledge. Out here, amidst the tidal shifts and fierce gales, amidst secrets declared and those yet unknown, was the journey to ourselves, to each other. I stood then, the timbers creaking beneath my feet, the room coming alive with a charged anticipation. Whatever lay ahead, it would be navigated together, our bond, a compass guiding us homeward, no matter where the sea might lead. The certainty of the thought brought an unexpected peace, a visceral understanding flowing through me. We had chosen this path, a voyage uncertain but undeniably ours. Our horizon is ours to make, James, I said, the declaration a promise shared in the silence, laden with unspoken truths. The sun dipped below the line of the water, painting the room in the hues of an impending dusk, and as we stood, hand in hand, I knew that whatever shadows lay beyond, we would illuminate them together. Chapter 79. Unexpected Connections Unravel. What if knowing the truth changes everything? James's question slipped into the air between us, like a pebble cast into a placid lake, creating ripples that spread wide and uncertain. The sea wind whipped through my hair, tangling it into rebellious ropes that danced across my vision. The trade ship beneath us groaned gently against the ocean's insistence, a steady heartbeat of wood and water. The sky above seemed an endless, turbulent canvas, its shades of gray shifting like the emotions threading through my mind. I turned to him, taking in the sharp angles of his face, softened by the muted light of the impending dusk. The intensity of his eyes, dark as the depths themselves, was punctuated by a vulnerability rarely shown, a stark contrast to the impenetrable barrier he often presented to the world. "You assume any revelation necessitates a full upheaval," I replied, feeling the words settle heavy on my tongue, drawing the line between denial and acknowledgement. Perhaps some truths demand acceptance rather than transformation. His smile was a flickering candle in a forgotten room, there and gone, leaving only the scent of something unsaid. Around us, the breeze whispered through the myriad ropes and sails, a symphony of past voyages and untold promises. It was as if nature itself held its breath while witnessing this subtle dance upon the ship's stern. The connection we had discovered was both intimate and unnerving, our ties to a child neither of us had met, yet whose presence felt vividly etched into our lives. There was a lifeline threading through generations, woven into the intricate patterns of our respective histories, now beckoning us closer. The sea's vast expanse reminded me of our journey. A tapestry of stars began to unfurl above, reflecting the myriad paths we might take should the truth ever truly reveal itself. My pulse kept time with the ship's sway as the discussion inevitable, like tidal currents, pulling me deeper into a reality I hadn't yet embraced. I remembered our first encounter, the unexpected magnetism that had drawn me toward him against my better judgment. Each interaction had laid the groundwork for a rapport both exhilarating and terrifying. Now, the burdens of our past loomed large, demanding a reckoning that neither of us could ignore. "Maybe," I said, rolling the possibility across my thoughts like dice over a game board. "Maybe uncovering the truth isn't about who we were, but who we could become." James' gaze softened, and I sensed a subtle shift akin to the evening mist rising from the warming sea. The salt-tinged air was thick with anticipation, and something far more profound. Trust, perhaps, though I had often wondered where trust truly began with James. A child, a nameless, faceless presence, a shared mystery that connected us with threads too delicate to see, yet too strong to sever. This was the truth that lay beneath our words, the possibility of an ancestry neither of us could untangle alone. The ship creaked, a gentle reminder of our precarious position amidst the world's immensity. Beneath our feet, its movements were a dance, a reminder of life, of journeys ending and beginning anew. My mind conjured images of distant shores, a land where this mystery might lead to clarity. "I used to think everything I did was for myself," he said, a note of self-derision weaving through his words, tethered to the possibility of redemption. "But now, there's so much more at stake." His hand brushed mine, a fleeting touch that spoke of promises suspended, held between what was known and what lay hidden. His presence had a magnetic quality that drew out courage and vulnerability in equal measure, a catalyst for the change I feared yet welcomed. The subtle lilt of his voice intertwined with the wind's gentle lament, rich and inviting as the depths themselves. I drew strength from his presence, from the unspoken resilience that flowed between us, our shared vow to unravel a truth long obscured by shadows. "We have to find the child," I said, the certainty landing firm and immovable, like the granite cliffs that bordered my childhood home. James nodded, his silhouette blending with the vast expanse beyond, a world full of yet unseen possibilities. Lives can be shattered, he mused, his tone both thoughtful and heavy with the wisdom of a burden shared. But sometimes what's broken can be remade, stronger than before. In that moment, I felt the vestiges of fear leach from my veins, replaced by a resolve tempered by understanding. The horizon loomed dark and expectant, a vast canvas waiting for our strokes of destiny. Together, we moved toward the ship's helm, our shared intent, weaving our futures into paths uncharted. Beneath the ethereal glow of a newly risen moon, the winds whispered promises old, new, and indefinably ours. And as the ship carried us toward that unknown horizon, I knew, without casting back, that I could change everything, if only I dared to embrace it. In the end, perhaps the truth wasn't what we feared, but what awaited us beyond the veil we had both been too afraid to pierce. With each step, hand in hand with James, I felt our path unfold with futility and hope, through the language of a desire that acknowledged nothing but our shared promise to uncover what was long forgotten and buried within the timeless compass of our hearts. Certainly, here's Chapter 80 of Conquered Desires. Chapter 80, Navigating Their New Reality. The ocean stretched out before us, a boundless field of deep indigo, interrupted only by the foamy crescents that whispered secrets to the shore. The horizon appeared endless and immutable, a stark contrast to the turmoil within my heart. The air was thick with humidity, a tangible reminder of both the closeness and the chasm between James and me. Seagulls circled overhead, their cries a haunting lament, as if they too felt the weight of things left unsaid. The sun dipped lower, casting a golden light across the deck of the ship where I stood, my hands curled around the polished wooden railing. Time seemed to move differently here, every moment stretched, pulled tight like the sails above. A breeze carried the salty tang of the sea, mingling with the faint aroma of spices, a gift from the distant markets we'd passed days before. It was strangely comforting, this amalgamation of scents, grounding me in the reality that I was far from the life I once knew. Despite the warmth of the setting sun, a shiver passed through me as I sensed his approach. James walked beside me, his presence palpable, a silent force that tugged at the threads of my composure. For a moment, we stood together in silence, neither willing nor able to break the shared quiet. "Are you still determined to resist the call of land?" he asked, his voice a low rumble that resonated within me, the complexity of his inquiry not lost in its simplicity. I turned to meet his gaze. His eyes, deep pools of contemplative thought, searched mine for answers I was reluctant to give. "The sea has its own allure," I finally admitted, letting the barest hint of vulnerability slip into my words. "It's endless, untamed." His lips curved in what might have been a smile, but I detected something deeper, a recognition, perhaps, of my own restlessness. "Just like you," he said quietly, his gaze never faltering. Beneath that unwavering stare, I felt exposed, as if he could see every hidden corner of my being. Yet there was comfort in that exposure, an understanding that transcended words. I leaned into the moment, allowing myself the luxury of his company. The ship's gentle sway mirrored the tumultuous dance of our hearts. The world continued its rhythm around us, footsteps of the crew on deck, the rhythmic creaking of the ship's timbers, the distant clamor of a buoy bell, yet we stood apart, wrapped in an insular cocoon of suspended time. "You once mentioned how the sea has no memory," he said, his tone void of judgment, only curiosity. Yet here we are, laden with memories. A wry smile slipped across my lips. Maybe it's the absence of memory that compels us to stay. There's solace in knowing that out here, we can rewrite our stories. The air seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for something profound to unfurl in our exchange. The sun dipped lower, igniting the horizon in hues of orange and violet, a testament to the beauty found in transitions. James leaned against the railing, his posture relaxed, but his eyes focused intently on the horizon, as if searching for answers among the waves. "What story do you wish to write, Deborah?" Each word was a stone dropped into the still waters of my mind, rippling outward into the depths of my uncertainty. So many choices, so much at stake. "I want to write a story of redemption," I replied, each syllable measured and sincere. "One where every mistake becomes a point of growth, where desires don't conquer but uplift." His eyes flicked toward me, a glimmer of something fierce, hope, perhaps, or understanding. They offered a silent affirmation, an acknowledgement that we were not defined by our past alone, but by who we chose to be now. "Then let's write it," he said softly, his voice a lifeline thrown across the abyss of doubt. The simplicity of his statement anchored me, tethering my spiraling thoughts back to the present. I reached out, letting my fingers brush his hand, a tentative gesture that carried the weight of all my unspoken fears and hopes. As night descended, cloaking the world in its comforting darkness, we remained standing together, our silence charged not just with possibility, but with a profound sense of peace. It was then, under the shimmering watch of the stars, that I understood the true nature of our connection. A journey not merely about where we were or where we wished to go, but about who we had become in each other's presence. And there, amid the murmurs of the ocean and the distant chorus of nocturnal song, I breathed a silent vow to navigate the reality we had chosen, a future uncharted, but undeniably ours. Chapter 81. Intertwined fates bind tighter. "I suppose you've known all along?" I ventured, casting my gaze to the mosaic of clouds beyond the porthole, their somber hues mirroring the question that lingered unsaid between us. James paused in the act of tying a knot with sailor skill, the muted creak of the ship underscoring the silence that followed, profound in its eloquence. His hand stalled, the line resting in his grasp like some taut symbol of the bind we now found ourselves entwined in. In those moments, words seemed to ponder their next appearance, hovering invisibly between us. I watched him, his profile etched against the deepening twilight, the slow rise and fall of his chest, a rhythmic counterpoint to my own escalating heartbeats. He turned his gaze toward me, the blue of his eyes catching the faded light with a question of their own, a challenge, perhaps, or an invitation. "Known what exactly, Deborah?" His voice was smooth as silk, but I could sense the rippling undercurrent beneath. I hesitated, tasting the brine of the sea in the air, feeling its salt cling to my skin, a tangible reminder of our surroundings. The trade ship groaned gently, rocking like a hulk of iron and spirit against the current. I sought to match the tranquility in his tone, though my mind turned like a ship upon the swell, searching. "You've orchestrated the entire journey," I said, my voice a lily pad on the surface of a pond, trembling yet afloat. Each revelation seems to fold into another, knitting us closer. The pause that followed was a presence, palpable as if it had taken form in the cabin. In it, there was the scent of oiled wood and distant hollers from the crew beyond, an array of human endeavors reduced to their simple truths by the open sea. His eyes traced my expression with meticulous attention, weighed down by knowledge I yearned to unearth. And yet I felt his gaze was not one of predator over prey, but rather an explorer's compass, finding true north. In his scrutiny there was an attentiveness that warmed my curiosity, rekindling it. "We are nothing if not creatures of our designs," he finally uttered, his tone an orchestra of intention, regret, and perhaps guilt. Yet designs have a way of evolving beyond their creator's original blueprints. His words settled softly in the space between us, dimensions of meaning absorbed by the darkened wood of the room, echoing through my mind like a symphony searching for its conclusion. My disbelief met his solemnity, unspeaking, undeniable. The quiet resumed, imbued with a strange ease, a comfort born of bare confessions and unsaid certainties. I could hear his breath harmonizing with the rhythmic song of waves against the hull, a lulling cadence that promised security even amidst tumult. "What is it you truly want, James?" I inquired, compelled to fathom the depths of his ambitions, his desires. The air was cool, caressing my skin as I spoke. The sound of my voice mingled with the distant cry of a gull, a spectral demand for honesty echoing across the expanse. There was a slight shift, a perceptible softening. He stood from where he perched on the edge of the bunk, closing the space between us, an approaching storm whose intent was not to ravage, but to cradle the earth in rain. For a moment it seemed the very air thickened with electricity, a manifestation of our intertwined futures. "I want what we craft together," he responded, low and deliberate, each syllable weighted with sincerity and a danger all its own. Something unencumbered, shielded by the strength we are for each other. His disclosure was both vow and vulnerability. It furnished the wooden frame of the conversation, like a tapestry embroidered with trust. The ship beneath us powered forward, ceaseless in its journey through the boundless waters. I allowed his admission to resonate within me, weaving itself into my resolve. In the quiet that lingered there, quiet which forgot the world's cacophony, we found solace, unspoken and profound. I reached for his hand, the warmth of his skin greeting mine with a reassurance no words could offer, and in that touch our realities merged. His enigmatic strength, my unwavering resolve, a tapestry of complexity that neither of us had anticipated but both had chosen. The mystery of our presence on this ship, bound for unknown horizons, unfolded beside us, silent testament to the bond intensifying, reinforced by each uncovered secret. There, amidst the rustle of waves and whispers of wind, I knew we drew strength from our vulnerability, and perhaps, just perhaps, we'd arrived at this threshold precisely as fate intended. The room, tempered by the gray luminescence of twilight, held its breath, bearing witness to the decision that was in itself a promise that would withstand the storms. And in this pregnant pause, heavy with meanings yet to be examined, the future awaited, craftsmen of our own fates, bound tighter with every step forward. The thought found its way through the tangled pathways of my mind, echoing softly in the gentling dark. What we will become together. Chapter 82, Tidal Waves of Truth. In the solitude of the ship's bow, where the ocean stretched expansively beyond the horizon, I found myself drawn into a private world of introspection. The sea's salt-laden breeze whispered secrets of distant shores and untold journeys, enveloping me in its timeless embrace. As I stood there, the ship's gentle sway beneath my feet echoed the unsteady rhythm of my own heart, suspended between the known and the uncharted. The morning sun cast a golden sheen across the water, its light slicing through the ocean's surface with an almost surgical precision, illuminating the depths below. The sky above was a vast canvas of azure, punctuated only by the occasional defiant cloud, sailing in tandem with our trajectory. Here, amidst the symphony of the natural world, I grappled with a growing recognition. My professional life, once a meticulously crafted armor, felt porous in the face of this visceral attraction, this fractured, beautiful thing I shared with James Carlyle. The surge of feeling was as indefatigable as the tides, impossible and uncontainable. It was James who pulled me from the grasp of my thoughts, his footsteps audible even over the sea's lullaby. There was an energy to his presence, an unspoken dialogue that occurred in the spaces between his words. As he joined me at the rail, the air hummed with the vibrancy that always seemed to accompany his company. "Deborah," he said, his voice a low melody, effortlessly threading through the soundscape of waves and wind. His eyes, as they met mine, held a depth that mirrored the ocean itself, unfathomably dark, yet capable of tender clarity. It was not lost on me that this man in all his complexity was as capable of wielding control with a whisper as with a shout. James, I replied, my voice steady yet soft, the intimacy of his name forming a bridge between our unspoken truths. We stood together, bound in the rich silence of mutual understanding. It was in the subtlety of his movements, the careful distance he maintained while still asserting a magnetic pull, that his multifaceted nature revealed itself. I've been thinking, I began, choosing my words as though threading a delicate needle, about what this means for both of us. He nodded, his gaze never wavering. The sincerity in his expression was a buoy, keeping us both afloat on the precarious waters of our entwined fates. We navigate uncharted territories, Deborah. Yet, it's the unknown that promises the greatest revelations. The ship sailed onward, a steadfast force, even as the internal struggle between fear and desire raged within me. The complexity of what lay between us defied easy resolution, imbuing every word, every glance, with layers of meaning that echoed 1,000 unspoken promises. As I wrestled with my professional responsibilities and the tumultuous feelings James awoke within me, I became acutely aware of the limits of language. Words could construct barriers or pathways, but could not encapsulate the fullness of our shared experience. The storm approaches, he observed, shifting his attention to the horizon, where an ominous bank of clouds gathered, painting a stark contrast against the purity of the sky. Yes, I acknowledged, the external weather a mirror to the internal climates we both contended with. Each gust of wind, each ripple on the water, seemed imbued with the tension of imminent change. James turned to face me fully now, his expression earnest, as though he could reach into the core of my being and draw forth my deepest truths. Our pasts might have set us adrift, but it's our choices now that determine the course. In those words, I found a semblance of clarity. The complexity of our bond was not a shackle, but a challenge, a call to navigate these emotional waters with honesty and courage. Our journey was not solitary. In facing the reality of ourselves, we fostered a connection forged in trust and authentic partnership. I choose to face whatever comes, I said, the resolve in my voice a steadfast flame that refused to wane. He nodded, acceptance etched into every line of his visage. There was a sovereignty in this shared choice, to walk unflinchingly toward the tempest, to embrace its cleansing potential rather than fear its destructive power. As the ship sliced through the mounting waves, I felt an exhilarating sense of release. Let the storm come, I thought. We are prepared, fortified by a truth as profound and expansive as the very sea that so intimately cradled these admissions. The tidal waves of truth surged on, mirroring and magnifying the potential for transformation that lay not only in the vastness of our surroundings, but within the depths of our very hearts. In that moment of clarity and courage, a singular thought emerged, luminous against the backdrop of uncertainty. Together, we are bound to conquer the tides. And perhaps even now, we were learning not just to survive the storm, but to revel within its mighty embrace. Chapter 83, Family Crisis Averted. I wonder if you've ever considered what it means to surrender, James said, his voice a low tide washing over the confines of my small office aboard the Adele Morning Star. His presence, much like the sea itself, was an indistinct blend of calm and restlessness, a force simultaneously reassuring and relentless. The ship groaned softly as it sliced through the Atlantic. I could feel the rhythm of the waves beneath my feet as an ever-present heartbeat, thudding softly and surely. The wood-paneled walls bore witness to our exchange, cloaked in the gold-dusted light of a setting sun filtering through the round portal window. The air was thick with the scent of aged teak, mingling with the salt tang of the sea. I tasted the salt when I inhaled, the promise of open waters gracing my lips, reminding me of the vast and unknowable depths beneath our vessel. James leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his silhouette defined by the sunset's dying illuminescence. This was not a man who laid his cards bare easily. He was a kaleidoscope, ever shifting, the facets of his character glimpsed only when the light fell just right. Surrender, I echoed, letting the word turn over in my mouth, tasting its implications. It was a concept I, Deborah Monroe, a woman of purpose and precision, found as foreign as this strange odyssey upon which we sailed. Yet it was undeniably appealing. He raised an eyebrow, his expression quizzical beneath the gentle burden of his gaze. Yes, surrender. You seem like the type who never grants it willingly. I drifted closer, drawn as if by gravitational pull. The hazy outline of distant seas spread out behind me, vast and unyielding, much like him. Lulled by the soft patter of sea against hull, I closed the space between us with measured steps, considering the myriad ways one could surrender, with grace or resistance, entirely or in pieces. When you speak of surrender, are we discussing this dilemma with Captain Hewitt? I asked, my voice steady, though my heart tapped a staccato rhythm trapped against my ribs. The captain's familial crisis had left an undeniable shadow over our voyage, coloring the once mundane with uncertainty. James's smile was a flicker, almost imperceptible, like sunlight playing on water, a delicate moment that shifted the tone. He's not the only one facing difficult decisions. Silence expanded between us, the kind that brimmed with unvoiced confessions. It was an unspeaking creature living in the room, weaving through the spaces neither of us was brave enough to fill. In such pauses, I felt our unspoken understanding, an invisible string tethering us to shared truths we dared not name. I glanced at the scattered papers on my desk. The captain's note had trembled with distress, the ink slightly smudged as if conveying the quiver of his hand. The family feud that had burgeoned, once unspoken, now threatened to unravel his concentration, becoming a specter that loomed larger with each passing day. It appears the captain has found a way forward, I said, intentionally vague, offering James the intrigue he so adored. Does this resolution bring peace? Not complete peace, but certainly a reprieve, I admitted. His wife, you see, has agreed to a truce. For now. James tilted his head, a question lingering in the creases of his forehead. Our gazes locked, a silent inquiry performed between the soles of our eyes. A truce. He said it not as a question, but as understanding, a tacit recognition of the complexity so often inherent in human relations. The light caught in the shadows of his face, etching his features with an intensity that made me bold. Not unlike what you and I possess, I ventured, sensing the boundary inch slightly further back for exploration. We too are in a state of truce. A mutual understanding, then, he mused, footsteps soundless as he strode into the room, coming to stand beside me by the portal, the world stretching out in silken waves of gold and indigo. And tell me, Deborah, what do you make of our understanding? The question hung a moment too long, and I felt the weight of its wings brush against my face like the halcyon breeze through the cracked window. It's an understanding that allows for transformation, which is more than I can say for many others. His laughter, rich and unsettlingly warm, intertwined with the metallic straining of the ship. Here was a man both tender and opaque, a mystery I yearned to unravel, even as it challenged every conviction I held dear. Transformation, he repeated softly, as though savoring the concept, a new taste on the tongue of his curiosity. As for surrendering to change, that takes courage. The notion found its cradle deep within me, settling in a place where it flared to life in surprising familiarity. It does, I murmured, realizing the profound truth of his observation. Outwardly, the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving in its wake an expanse of velvet night sprinkled with nascent stars, a quilt stitched with possibilities. There in the gathering dusk, a shared courage kindled between us. It was the brave, unruly thing I had never anticipated finding aboard this ship, amidst the tapestry of sorrow and hope. Our ends are never truly known, James said, a finality imbued in the soft edges of his voice. There was something ineffable between us, a fragile symphony between the known paths and the uncharted waters, beneath skies awash in heaven's deepest hues. We adapt, I countered, nodding toward the outer dark, the endless, pervading mystery of life's journey. He matched my gaze, a fierce intelligence alight in his eyes, simultaneously protective and speculative. In the pregnant quietude that followed, I marveled at the serenity that allowed our intertwined fates to unfold without constraints. A life forged anew with every breath, every choice, every moment shared. He reached for my hand then, the warmth of his touch promising all and demanding nothing. I saw our reflections in the glass of the window, two travelers embarking upon the horizon with a promise etched into our very beings. His firm grip rendered my uncertainties more temptation than tribulation. And so, with a heartbeat steady and strong within my breast, I turned to face the encroaching night, the comforting solidity of James's presence, a testament to the shared voyage ahead. As silence embraced the room once again, I knew with clarity unimagined that surrender, like transformation, is its own kind of freedom. It was in that radiant truth the journey found its resolution, carried forth in quiet communion beneath a sky teeming with stars. Certainly, let me provide the opening for this chapter, Adapting to New Dimensions. Chapter 84, Adapting to New Dimensions. The ship's constant thrumming beneath my feet had become a familiar pulse, a heartbeat tethering me to this floating microcosm of life amid endless blue. My fingers traced the edge of the wooden crate in which geraniums, vibrant and audacious, rested. They were survivors of a world on land, much like me, though their roots thirsted for soil the sea could not offer. James stood at the helm, a figure at once solitary and commanding. The morning sun painted him in broad strokes of gold, catching on the faded folds of his rolled-up sleeves, the shadows they cast, intricate, against his forearms. I watched him through the veil of my lashes, mindlessly turning a delicate petal between my fingers. We had grown accustomed to these quiet intervals, where time stretched languorously, permitting reflection and the gentle forging of bonds unspoken. "How is your garden today, Deborah?" James's voice carried soft yet firm, a discerning touch to the syllables that stirred the air between us. "They're thriving," I replied, allowing a smile to flutter at the corners of my mouth. Their resilience captivated me, each plant a quiet testament to endurance and adaptation. Perhaps I too had grown roots here, unforeseen connections binding me in ways that were unanticipated, yet strangely welcomed. He approached with measured steps, his presence a fitting counterpoint to the open expanse around us. Those unsaid words, the silences that always held more than language could encapsulate, enveloped us once again. Between us, there existed an understanding, a mutual acknowledgement of the path we had embarked on, steeped in complexities layered like waves. His gaze traced my face, as if searching beyond my features into the layered depths where thoughts and confessions hid. For a brief moment, our eyes locked, an invisible filament drawing taut with the tension of truths unexplored. The ship's rhythm offered a metronomic backdrop as I succumbed to the impulse to probe, surrender to the curiosity teetering on the edge of trepidation. "Doesn't it ever tire you, James?" I asked, the words emerging with more vulnerability than intended. "Carrying the weight of so many uncertainties?" A subtle dimming in his eyes I had learned to recognize, the sign of the script flipped inward, where rehearsals of restraint and responses took place. He lowered himself into the chair across from mine, the old wood groaning under his weight as he leaned forward, elbows on knees, his composure a blend of thoughtfulness and gentle imposition. "Uncertainties have become a companion," he finally said, voice measured against the tableau of sea and sky. "Strangely comforting in their unpredictability. And you, Deborah, you navigate them with a grace that continually surprises me." The admission was a key slid into the lock of us, the door of our dialogue opening wider. Beneath the veneer of shared intimacy, an electric undercurrent ran, daring me to cross into territories yet undefined. I found him riveting in these moments, the raw honesty he laid bare, affecting me more deeply than any practiced charm ever could. We sat steeped in our separate contemplations, his gaze settling on the geranium, cradled in my palm. The weight of his silence beckoned confession, curiosity peering from the corners of his eyes with a quiet insistence, respectful of the boundaries, yet subtly inviting their breach. Being here amidst all this, I gestured expansively, encapsulating the vast liquid horizons and the claustrophobic confines of our confined existence. It's forcing me to see beyond the constraints I thought defined me. I find myself changing, recalibrating. A breeze ruffled through, carrying the scent of salt and whispered echoes of lands yet distant. He inclined his head, an invitation to elaborate, his hands an unmoved portrait of strength and assurance. Maybe I've accepted that my edges can blur, my convictions shift, I continued, my voice a thread binding our shared truths. It's frightening, this release of control. Yet, the word lingered between us, pregnant with anticipation. Yet, a pivot on which future possibilities balanced precariously, each bearing the same potential for upheaval as for clarity. I looked at him, uncertainty clouding the dark pools of his eyes, drawing me deeper, further into the web of complexities we wove together. Yet, he echoed, dissecting the space the word created with a reverence quiet and profound. Sometimes, the letting go redefines the very essence of who we are. In that threshold of silence following his assertion, we held the essence of shared territory. An awareness of self had always guided me, though now it accommodated a dimension tinged by his presence, colored by our choices and the introspective maze the journey would navigate next. The ship surged forward, its steady course against the vastness, a metaphor underscoring our precarious yet committed journey. As James reached for the remaining geraniums, delicacy woven in his motions, the unspoken promise that we would sail these unknown seas together resonated between us, no matter the storms life conjured. A new chapter indeed, in which we were both protagonists. Our lives unfolding with each crest and trough the journey laid in our path. Suddenly, an errant wave crashed against the hull, tossing sea spray into the air, sending a cascade of crystalline droplets to kiss our skin. And with it, my heart leapt, the thrill of unexpected delight echoing the assured trust in James's smile. He met my gaze, a silent question shimmering. "I think I'm ready to discover what lies beyond the horizon," I said, answering what neither of us had spoken aloud. James nodded, the corners of his eyes crinkling just so, his presence a warm, steadfast companion against the expanse of a future unwritten, but embraced with both hands. In the cradle of today, we were tethered, creators of our own destiny, and I realized then that adaptation was not merely survival, but the heart's endeavor to embrace new dimensions. Chapter 86, Mending Through Mutual Desires. The quiet, rhythmic sound of waves lapping against the side of the ship was punctuated by the faint creaking of wood. I found myself ensconced in the ship's library, the wood-paneled walls emanating a comforting scent of aged mahogany and parchment. The air was cool, made crisp by the sea breeze filtering through the crack in the small window, carrying with it a tang of salt that clung to my senses. My fingers danced across the spines of the books, a tactile journey through tales of ancient mariners and silent romances, their stories buried amid leather and dust. Each touch was a small rebellion against the encroaching chaos of my thoughts, an attempt to find solace in the familiarity of printed words. Yet my mind was tethered to one inevitable presence: James. In our shared universe, his name was more than mere syllables. It was a tumult, a catalyst, and softly, a balm. I picked through our tangled history, memories interwoven like fragile threads in an unpredictable tapestry. James found me here, as if drawn by some invisible thread. His arrival was announced by nothing more than the slight modulation of the ship's floorboards. his presence a disturbance in the calm I had cloaked myself in. He stood in the doorway for a moment, an arresting silhouette against the dim light that seeped in from the hallway behind him. Distracting, isn't it? His voice, low and resonant, laced through the quiet, drawing me from my reverie. He approached, his steps deliberate, as though he were grounding himself with every move. I felt the air shift at his proximity, my awareness of him as acute as the soft flutter of parchment in the stillness. Distraction is perhaps an understatement, I replied, my voice a shadow against the warmth of the wood. A self-effacing smile played on my lips as our eyes locked. A shared glance charged with the unsaid, with truths and promises fragile as spun glass. This was James, a man of complexities that folded over themselves, layer upon intricate layer. His past made manifest in the secrets that echoed between us. My world was reordered with every exchange, every moment enveloped in the potential of us. He settled into the chair opposite mine, a table of polished oak between us. The silence resumed, a third presence in our delicate interplay. Our eyes remained interlocked across the distance, speaking words we hadn't yet learned to voice, our desires weaving a tentative bridge over the chasm history had carved. "Have you found any revelations among the pages?" he asked, a glint of curiosity lingering beneath his thoughtful gaze. Revelations? Perhaps, I mused, tracing the cover of a book that lay open before me. Though the revelations I seek aren't written, I confessed, allowing a breath of vulnerability into the space between us. A concession James would neither exploit nor diminish. His fingers brushed against the surface of the table, creating an unspoken sonnet within the mundane. I watched the movement, caught in the rhythm that tethered us together in this hush of acknowledgement. "Deborah," he began, his voice bearing the weight of an unrefined truth, "every moment I spend with you shapes a future I never anticipated, a labyrinth of choices and a prism of desires we've barely begun to explore." Heat flushed my cheeks, an involuntary reaction not purely of embarrassment, but of the thrill that coursed beneath each word. We were exploring uncharted territory, where clarity was obscured by the mists of the past and the unpredictability of what lay ahead. Yet within that nebula I found an unexpected bond, a partnership forged in shared vulnerability and an intensity that both frightened and excited me. In the intimacy of that moment, without pretense or guarded veils, he reached across the table, a hesitant offering. His touch was gentle, fingertips brushing against mine, grounding and ethereal. For a brief heartbeat, time suspended, every heartbeat, every breath shared and synchronous. It was an anchor, a talisman against the tempestuous swirl of misgivings. Together, I breathed, a single word manifesting as a promise, an idea solidified, our journey one of mutual mending and boundless possibility. He inclined his head, his expression shifting to a softness that endeared itself to the solitude within me. "Together," he echoed, a simple utterance, yet it carried the weight of 1,000 intentions, a compass to guide us through the tempest of our shared narrative. The quietude enveloping the library became a cocoon, sacred in its temporal sanctity. Here, between the pages of others' stories, we began to script our own, lines of desire and reconciliation. As I allowed a slow exhale, my senses tethered to the moment, to him, I realized there was no solitude I needed to fear, for where James was, possibility abounded. The ship, an entity of its own, swayed gently on the sea, the rhythm a lullaby to our burgeoning harmony. As we lingered in that tranquil embrace, we became less two distinct individuals and more a symphony of consonants, discovering the notes we would play together and the silent spaces that punctuated our shared harmony. James, with his secrets and relentless forward momentum, had entered my world like a storm, and yet beneath his tempest lay a sanctuary, tender and vulnerable, revelations layered beneath each heartbeat. The future lay uncertain still, a horizon not yet defined, but we gazed upon it, hand in hand, tethered now not by circumstance, but by choice. A choice to heal, to desire, to turn beyond individual sorrows, forging a tapestry vibrant and whole. And thus, within the quiet of the evening, as stars painted their constellations on the velvet night sky, a single shared glance spoke volumes, woven in a nuanced understanding that needed no captions, no footnotes. As the ship moved ever so gently, we moved with it, into the dawn of what belonged to both and neither. A story filled with shared ink and uncharted pages. An understanding reached, echoed in the library's hearth. Time folded around us, resonant, immutable. In each shared breath, James murmured, a warmth in his words I would always cherish. Deborah, here is where it all mends. And that statement hung between us, an anchor and a release. As I understood, this was both an end and a beginning. Chapter 87, Open Waters of Exploration. I wonder if the sea ever tires of its own secrets, I mused aloud, as we stood at the bow, the night's silken blackness unfolding around us, anchoring our shared silence. The vast ocean was a dark mirror, reflecting the stars above in its restless depths, each wave a whispered confidant to the heavens' timeless tales. James turned slightly, his silhouette framed by the lantern-lit glow that marked the ship's paths in a night. Secrets are only tiresome if they're misunderstood, he replied with a deliberate slowness, his voice low and warm, like the hushed stirrings of midnight air. His words hung between us, an unspoken acknowledgement of the uncharted territory we sailed, both on these high seas and within ourselves. The wear of the day clung to us, its residue of tension and anticipation melding into the salt-laden breezes that teased the deck. A shiver feathered up my spine, as if the ocean breeze could invade the sanctum of my bones and brush against the guarded corners of my heart. "Do you regret any of those secrets?" I asked, the words escaping before I could corral them, words that dived into the deeper currents of my thoughts. His pause was a palpable thing, as though he weighed each possible answer, not merely in his mind, but in his very being. His gaze, deep and enigmatic, settled on the horizon, where night swallowed day. "Regret," he said at last, "is just a lens that, without context, distorts the view." There it was, a moment of vulnerability in the intonation, captured in the unsteady thoughts reverberating beneath his calm exterior. It pulled me closer, not physically. I dared not sway even a fraction closer, but emotionally, bridging the yawning expanse between our unspoken fears and desires. The subtle perfume of the sea mingled with the sharp tang of the salted air, heightening my senses, as though any shift in the wind might unravel the intricacies binding us. The ship's creaking lullaby underfoot was at once comforting and a reminder of the precariousness of our path. "You don't really answer questions, do you?" I replied, with a narrow smile that he could undoubtedly hear in my tone, soft, teasing, yet probing. James's eyes found mine, and there was something transformative in them, an internal barrier placed there long ago easing away, if only slightly. "Perhaps I prefer the questions with layers, as you might prefer exploring those layers to simple answers." His answer resonated with quiet strength, revealing factional glimpses of the man who had carved pathways through my thoughts each day since we met. Here he stood, a complex amalgam of protective intent and indecipherable past, a guardian and an enigma. The wind shifted suddenly, tangling my hair into a wild halo around my head. James raised a hand, careful, almost reverent, and smoothed the strands from my cheek, his touch leaving a lingering warmth. In that moment, stretched between the vastness of water and night, we stood not as seeker and subject, but as two beings cast adrift upon tides neither had wholly chosen, but now navigated together. Our gazes were anchored upon each other, eyes communicating in voiceless verses, sharing fragments of hope and challenge. Words were unnecessary companions to this communication. They would intrude, mangling the purity of unvoiced understanding. Perhaps it is folly to question the future as the sea questions the shore, I whispered, beginning to sense where the boundaries of longing and fear morphed into one seamless horizon. My confession was an echo of the wrestled tides within me, where the desire for control battled the temptation of surrender to our shared adventure. James tilted his head, the corner of his mouth lifting, with a grin about to pull the night into laughter. His signature smile, both wicked and gentle. That sounds suspiciously like poetry. I shook my head, feeling the bubbles of levity prickle my skin as the rare sound of laughter surfaced. And here I thought you appreciated a deeper question. We fell into silence, the kind that knew comfort rather than the demand for sound. It was only when James's voice broke the quietude again that I felt the deeper pound of introspection. Deborah, he said my name as if tracing each letter carefully, anchoring them with significance. What is it that calls you to the edges of your own explorations? His inquiry was more intimate than any touch, seeking entry into the guarded sanctum I guarded against intrusions. In the dimness veiling us, I weighed honesty against reserve. James had shown me shadows of himself, not in words, but in the reverence of his presence. It's the desire to find, I began, hesitating under the necessity for truth. A place where nothing needs to be hidden, where choices become paths, not regrets. James's smile softened, an understanding passing between us that was brighter than any lighthouse at the sea's edge, a guiding warmth in the immensity of an uncertain journey. Then let us not hide from where those choices might lead, he murmured. As the ship glided through the vast open waters, I felt the shifts within me, a map slowly unfurling, boundaries redrawn by the tides of trust and courage. I knew then, the journey alongside James was charted in powerful, unspoken accords, cemented against the backdrop of this sprawling ocean. I suppose, I said softly, more to myself than him, though I felt his attentive listening, that even the stars must envy the secrets within the depths of the sea. And in the reflective quiet that enveloped us, the night held its breath, and for one sweeping moment amidst the expanse of water and sky, I saw our future spilling unreservedly into the velvet canvas before us, an open invitation more profound than any written star, waiting, promising. Chapter 88. Storms of Emotion Within. The rhythmic lapping of the waves against the hull of the maelstrom had a hypnotic quality, like a pulse that tethered me to the present, yet left me adrift in tumultuous seas of introspection. The air was thick, imbued with the familiar tang of salt and the subtle woodsy aroma of polished teak. It was a maritime symphony, a confluence of scents and sounds that encased us in solitude, far removed from the burdens of duty and expectation. I stood by the starboard rail, the chill of the breeze biting my skin where my sleeves fell short. Its embrace was both bracing and consoling, a mirror to the conflicting emotions swirling within me. James had retreated below deck some hours ago, giving me space to untangle the thoughts that seemed bound by marine knots, defying logic's nimble fingers. A seagull cried above, its call a sharp punctuation mark in the air's languid stillness. I envied its freedom. Its soaring path had clarity and direction, while I felt anchored to uncertainty, enmeshed in the complexity of our shared experience. The past week had been a tempest of revelations and realizations, each discovery of James' enigmatic layers only serving to deepen the bond we had, unexpectedly, irrevocably forged. He had won me in a card game, a seemingly innocuous transaction that belied the dark undercurrents of our encounter. The rationale of my professional exterior had slowly eroded, revealing a landscape raw and untamed. At its heart was James, a man of shadow and light, whose fierce intelligence matched his capacity for tenderness. a dichotomy that defied easy categorization. The sound of footsteps drew my attention. James appeared on deck, his presence a compelling force that disrupted my reverie. He moved with an innate grace, each step deliberate and assured. And as he joined me by the rail, the space between us seemed to hum with unspoken understanding. "Are the seas quieter tonight? Or is it merely the calm before the storm?" he mused, his voice a low, resonant murmur that settled into the air like a warm blanket. "They say storms often bring clarity," I replied, allowing the corners of my mouth to lift slightly. He studied me then, his eyes a deep, inscrutable brown, full of questions yet unasked. The wind tousled his hair, lending him a certain boyishness that belied the commanding persona he so often wore. It was his unexpected vulnerability that tugged at my heart most, stirring a yearning to unravel the mysteries that lingered beneath his enigmatic veneer. We stood together, our silence a testament to the connection we harbored, a communion of thoughts and emotions that transcended the need for words. "When the tempest comes, Deborah, will you stand by my side?" His question, though simple in form, held layers of intent, an invitation, a plea, a challenge. The answer sprang from a place within I had scarcely acknowledged before his arrival in my life. "James, I've weathered storms before, albeit of a different nature. Yet with you, the landscape is unknown." His eyes softened, the slightest curve of a smile betraying a hidden relief. It was a moment of raw candor, two souls unmasked, bridging the chasm of fear and doubt that often stymied our journey together. As twilight descended, a dusky glow infused our surroundings. We remained by the rail, bearing witness to the day's end, a shared ritual that had become a sanctuary amid the chaos of shifting horizons. I felt the gentle press of his arm against mine, a weightless reassurance that anchored me to this newfound and fragile alliance. The ocean whispered secrets beneath us, its cadence all too willing to absorb our confessions, reverberating alongside the beat of my heart. James, sensing the shift within me, gently clasped my hand, an unspoken promise that spoke volumes in its simplicity. The warmth of his touch held an unexpected tenderness, and in that touch was an understanding, profound and unbidden. A decision had been made in that quiet moment, even as uncertainty clouded the expanding twilight. The tempest within was more palpable than any approaching storm. Yet, as is often true of transformations of the soul, it was neither fearsome nor calamitous. It was instead a dance, a duet, an as yet unwritten chapter of a narrative we were composing in tandem. Together, we watched as the tendrils of daylight surrendered to the embrace of night. The horizon a seam between comprehension and the unknown. Questions yet lingered. Of course, how could they not in a world defined by their insistence? Yet as I lingered in the sanctity of this ethereal interlude, new possibilities unfurled like sails unfettered by the weight of doubt. The world ahead was poised, ready to be navigated not by the solitary expeditions of the past, but as co-conspirators and architects of our destiny. Then, with a resolve newfound and resolute, I whispered into the evening's stillness, "We've begun something here that cannot be unraveled. Together, I believe we can harness any storm." It was a decree more than a declaration, as much for myself as for the man who stood beside me, a man whose presence had upended the axis on which my world turned. The captain of the maelstrom, yes, but also of my own heart, a navigator through both the tempests and the calms that await. Chapter 89, Binding Promises Made. The ocean murmured its eternal lullaby beneath the ship, a rhythmic cadence that mirrored the tumult within my heart. As stars freckled the sky, a gentle breeze traced its fingers through the rigging, singing a song of distant shores and untraveled waters. It was a night suspended in time, where the boundaries of dreams and reality blurred, much like my own sense of certainty, malleable, shifting with the whispered history of the sea. In the silence of the deck, I stood alone, my thoughts swirling like the eddies of the darkened water below. The air was redolent of salt and possibility, with a hint of something unnameable that stirred the depths of longing within me. The world felt raw under the heaven's canopy, a mirror to my own exposed soul. James emerged from the shadows with a grace that seemed part of the ship itself, his presence both commanding and comforting. He wore the night like an old companion, his eyes reflecting the celestial tapestry above us. There was something arresting in the way he observed the world, a gaze that pierced through the veil of the ordinary, unraveling complexities with an admirable ease. "Beautiful night," he remarked, his voice a worn timbre that resonated deep within, fueling the quiet conflagration we dared to kindle between us. "Yes," I replied, words slipping past my tongue before I realized they were thoughts meant to remain unspoken. "It feels expectant." The subtle weight in his gaze told me he had heard the uncertainty behind my demure acquiescence. "You're not accustomed to the unknown, are you, Deborah? The unpredictable?" A laugh escaped me, a soft sound tinged with a bitterness I didn't intend. "You think me too rigid? A woman disenfranchised from spontaneity?" His smile was a gentle quirk of the lips, shadowed and enigmatic. "I think you, perhaps, are more inclined to see paths clearly, even when they wind before you." It was then that the tranquility built between us, as palpable as the salty breeze, shifted into something deeper, an understanding forged by unspoken admission. We were bound by invisible threads, woven by the subtleties unacknowledged in the light of day. I marveled at the potency of our unguarded silences, at how they spoke volumes, with neither of us voicing a word. The ship creaked softly beneath our feet, a stark reminder of our place amidst the vastness that surrounded us. The stars glittered like shards of a shattered promise, fragile yet resilient against the fathomless dark. "The sea is indifferent," I mused, my gaze trained somewhere far beyond the horizon, a place where dreams danced with reality and hope was born anew. "It holds nothing for us, nor for the promises we make under its watchful eye." James stepped closer, the warmth of his presence dispelling the chill carried from the waves. "Promises are bound by more than place or circumstance," he said, his voice a gentle pivot against my apprehensions. "They find strength in the heart's resolve." His words sank into me, heavy and anchoring. For so long my life had been guided by caution's invisible hand. Now I stood upon a precipice, my heart daring me to leap. I turned to him then, allowing my eyes to linger on his face, drinking in the contours and plains that spoke of stories untold. "Can you promise me that, James?" I asked, a tremor threading through my voice. "Can you promise that what we have is more than fleeting?" It was as though the world stilled, the night holding its breath in reverent anticipation. The stars seemed to lean closer, eavesdropping on the sacred conviction nestled in his reply. "I can promise," he said, his voice a gentle vow echoing through the straits of my uncertainty, "that what we have is as real as the tide, as enduring as the stars above. And in that certainty, I will remain by your side." It was a declaration woven with the threads of destiny, both haunting and healing, vibrant in its simplicity. Together we stood amidst the timelessness of the cosmos, two lives entwined, casting our hopes against the vast, unyielding expanse. In that moment, the sea ceased its endless dance of ambiguity, surrendering to a singular truth I had long denied. I, too, could embrace the unpredictable, finding strength not in foresight, but in faith. And so we remained, held by the night's embrace, two souls adrift, yet anchored by promises echoing with the heartbeat of the world. When I finally spoke, My voice was but a whisper, carried away by the echo of water caressing the hull. Our journey begins. Indeed, James whispered back, his words like a tender caress across the expanse of my uncertainty. Together, we gazed out over the waters, where the future lay cradled in the arms of night, ready to unfold its mysteries and its promises yet unspoken. Chapter 90. Commitment in Storm's Fury. Why do you insist on challenging the very foundations of my heart, James? The question hung between us, suspended in the air, thick with anticipation and the scent of impending rain. The wooden planks beneath my feet trembled with the steady pulse of the ship, a heartbeat of defiance against the furious sea. Above, dark clouds rolled, pregnant with the promise of turmoil, their edges fringed with the ominous glow of distant lightning. James stood at the helm, his hands sure and unflinching on the wheel, his gaze fixed on the horizon, a study in determination and command. It was in these moments that his presence seemed to fill the expanse of the deck, formidable, yet surprising in its grace. His silhouette was a statue of purpose carved against the storm's brewing wrath. I closed my eyes briefly and inhaled deeply, the salty air sharp as it danced over my senses, leaving traces of the ocean's mysteries on my lips. My mind, however, was anchored to the labyrinth of my own feelings, to the continually unfolding enigma that was James. "They say the heart is meant to be tested," he replied, his voice a low rumble, barely discernible over the rising wind. "And what is life without a little testing?" The corner of his mouth curved upwards, but his eyes, those pools of unfathomable depth, were fixed on me, serene and searching. The ship lurched forward, rising to meet the challenge of a towering wave as seconds stretched into eternity. I tightened my grip on the rail, the wood digging into my palms, grounding me in this precipice between desire and fear. "The storm challenges us all," I replied, my words an anchor as well as a plea for comprehension. "Yet it is not only the elements we must contend with." James transferred the wheel to a seasoned crewman before closing the distance between us. His approach was deliberate, each step a silent acknowledgement of the distance we had traveled together, not merely in miles, but in the intricacies of heart and mind. He stopped by my side, his presence a protective barrier against the chaos that surrounded us. In an unexpectedly tender gesture, he took my hand, our fingers interlocking like the ivy that once adorned the manor I called home. His touch carried the warmth of assurance, a pact wordlessly made, a shared vow against the storm. My breath caught, not from fear, but from a sudden rushing clarity of emotion, as blinding as the lightning bolts that cracked the sky. "Do you trust me?" he asked, his voice now an undertow of tranquil gravity amid the tumult. It was a simple question, yet profound in its implications, reaching beyond the moment into the very essence of our bond. The answers unfurled within me, truths I had not dared to give voice to until now. The vulnerability in his query was unexpected, making my pulse quicken not with anxiety, but with a kinship fiercely acknowledged. "Yes," I said, the word a whisper, a single note of music in a symphony of thunder. And there, amidst the fury of nature, I realized I meant it more than I ever thought possible. The enormity of my trust was woven with the threads of our shared silences, the laughter that echoed when we forgot the world, and the unspoken understanding that bound our disparate souls. The ship pitched, gallant against the swell, and I pressed closer to steady myself. Here, amidst the storm's might, the quiet within us was resolute, unfaltering. Every challenge, every question, each glance shared was a step further into this journey we had dared to begin. "Together, then," he affirmed, a proclamation etched in the air, resonant and unwavering. His strength did not intimidate, rather it infused me with a sense of my own. As I looked at him, I saw not the dark secrets that shadowed his past, but the light he shone upon my own uncertainties, the warmth in his eyes a refuge, one I had not dared dream of seeking before our paths crossed on this ceaseless voyage. The rain began as a gentle patter, cool droplets that sketched intricate patterns on our skin and mingled with the spray that rode the wind's laughter. We stood there, two souls rendered vibrant by the electricity of understanding, bound together as much by silent compromise as by fervent vows whispered through our heartbeats. The storm claimed its dominion above, yet our covenant remained steadfast below. I shut my eyes to everything but the sensation of rain, the taste of salt, the solidity of his arm around my shoulders, a singular truth amidst the maelstrom. Even within the fiercest tempest, I murmured, feeling the words take form. There's a stillness we create, a haven we are for one another. His nod was slow, deliberate, a king surveying his realm and finding it sufficient within its chaos. Our shared laughter was swallowed by the gale, but its essence warmed us singularly, uniquely. In that thunderous revelation, void of conventional romance, but rich with the substance of authenticity, our storm of days bound us closer than any fair weather ever could. And as the ship sailed bravely onward, slicing through the torrent, it felt as though we too surged forward into a future forged by our own hands, fortified by trust. With a tranquility that belied the looming, unpredictable wrath of the sea, I was held fast by our ceaseless motion, alive in the storm, vivid in my rediscovery of self and other. He squeezed my hand once more, a brief pressure infused with promises beyond spoken words. In the unyielding embrace of the storm, our truths were revealed and cherished. And in the storm's fury, I kept thinking, commitment is no mere chain, but rather a compass. The storm did not cease. It could not quell or quiet what had become unbreakable between us. A life bearing the weight of a compass that led us not away from danger, but directly into the heart of our enduring connection. I'm glad you're interested in writing a chapter from Conquered Desires. Here's a potential take on the chapter you envisioned. Chapter 91. Desires Cement Through Trials. Wind lashed the rolling sea into a chaotic orchestra, the waves striking relentlessly against the iron hull of the ship, like some relentless insistence. The sky mirrored my tangled emotions, a tempestuous gray curtain draped with threads of dark blue and silver, restless and charged with an unseen electricity. Each gust seemed to echo the storm within me, a cacophony of doubt and longing. I stood at the railing, the sharp cold seeping through my woolen coat, the sea spray mingling with the salt of my tears. It was as if the world conspired to remind me of the fluidity of the boundaries I had once fiercely guarded. The horizon stretched infinitely, a blurred demarcation between the turmoil of the ocean and the firmament above. James approached silently, his presence a steady force amidst the gale. There was a gravitas about him today, a quiet strength that seemed to anchor the churning seas and skies to stillness just around him, as if even the elements paused in reverence. The scent of sea air mixed with a hint of citrus emanated from him, grounding me even as the ship swayed and lunged beneath our feet. "You find comfort in the storm," he observed, though his tone bore no surprise. "It suits the way I feel," I replied, my eyes still fixed on the turbulent expanse. The truth was, in the chaos I found clarity, a stripping away of pretense that laid bare the rawness of desire and fear, hope and resignation. We stood together, silently among the symphony of wind and sea, as if some invisible tether bound us, a connection that went beyond words and touched at the very fabric of our beings. I felt it strengthen, this bond that wove its way through the trials imposed by the unyielding storm, binding us with an unspoken promise that was less about the future and more about unwavering presence in this turbulent present. "Every choice leads us further down an uncharted path," he mused, his voice low, carrying a richness that matched the deep stillness in his eyes. "What have you chosen, Deborah?" "I don't know what choice has brought me here," I confessed, my words a silent prayer lost in the wind. It was not strictly accurate. Some choices seemed to have been inevitable, my steps drawn to his in a rhythm older than memory. "Perhaps it is not the choice, but the becoming through it that matters," he suggested, his hand reaching out to cover mine on the railing. The warmth of his touch spread through me, chasing away the chill, a reminder that chaos holds creation within its core. Together, we watched as the sky began opening, the storm slowly giving way to the clarity of daylight creeping through the rift. Each ray was a testament to endurance, each respite a renewal, reflected in our steady breath. "James," I began, words of intent forming. He turned, his gaze a study of calm intrigue, and I felt the profound pull of shared recognition anchoring me. "I need to understand the nature of power between us." "It isn't power, Deborah, but trust that binds us," he said, and his certainty was unshaken, as solid as the very structure of the ship under our feet. "The storm outside merely makes the calm in here more apparent." His hand pressed slightly, a gentle insistence that neither overpowered nor prescribed, but reassured in its constancy. I looked into his eyes, finding myself reflected in their depths, as if he held up a mirror to my own fracturing doubts and desires, revealing the core strength I needed to acknowledge. In that moment, it was clear. This connection of ours transcended the physical realm. It had become a symbiotic exchange of spirit. It left me changed, molded by its very existence as steel is by flame, strong yet pliable under the right influence. "I trust you," I admitted, the sincerity anchoring my words and surprising even myself with its weight. These verbs had become nouns in their saying: trust, desire, love, as tangible as the ship itself. They were the foundation of this venture into the unknown. He nodded, the simple gesture acknowledging what words could not convey. "We will weather what comes, as we have today." Under the retreating storm clouds, his quiet assurance was a solid truth, etched as a promise for whatever lay ahead. As the sun broke through, casting faint rainbows across the dissipating stormy sky, I felt the echo of fortitude within. Our affections, thus cemented, recognized both trials and triumphs as the necessary forge to what we were at last beginning to truly understand: a communion of hearts that accepted the vastness of the sea without fear. When James finally spoke again, it was as if each word was a crafted testament to the truth he had known long before I dared to grasp it. "We are enough, Deborah." And in the wind's retreat, in the stillness that followed, his truth found its rightful place within me. I hope this captures the emotional depth and complexity you were seeking. Please let me know if there are any adjustments or additional directions. Chapter 92. Underneath Raging Skies. "Do you sometimes wonder if the storm knows our secrets?" James asked, his voice laced with both curiosity and a strange depth of knowledge. I glanced at him, my fingertips brushing against the cold steel railing, a conduit for the electric tension of the air surrounding us. The storm raged with a defiant majesty outside, the wind howling through the rigging of the ship, playing its mournful tune. Yet, amid the cacophony of nature's fury, James remained an enigma, rooted in a stillness that drew me to him against my better judgment. The sea, in its furious dance with the sky, mirrored the swirling tempest within me. Each crack of thunder seemed to echo the strangled thoughts I could not quite articulate. Here I stood, both wary and wanting, unraveling under a man's unwavering gaze, while the world around me seemed to teeter on the brink of chaos. "No," I replied, my voice only just audible above the gale. "I think, like us, it is merely trying to find its way through uncertain times." His dark eyes, intense and probing, met mine with an understanding born of shared turbulence, the silent admission that the storm's secrets, much like ours, lay somewhere behind the mask of the familiar.